proposed text.
Thank you very much, Chair. And let me take a chance at explaining what we suggest to do to bring to you a proposed decision following the session we had yesterday on the third-party review and the one we had today listening to the UNDP administrator and team. Again, thanks very much for the excellent discussion we had yesterday and today. We have taken good note of the observations shared and the feedback received by Council members in the course of these discussions. And the main observation here is we have to adapt the timeline to respond to comments and suggestions presented yesterday by Council members, as well as to, in coherence, I would say, with the third-party review recommendation, as well as with what we heard this morning from the administrator. So we're proposing to circulate a draft in early afternoon for your full consideration, and we will welcome your feedback. Consideration of the decision will then be brought back into the agenda tomorrow, and the draft will include the following three major changes compared to the one we had submitted in writing as part of the third-party review proposal. First, we would like to clarify and adapt deadlines to confirm that UNDP would be expected to provide monthly reports to the Secretariat on the implementation of all action under its management action plan. And the Secretariat would also continue to provide updates to Council until the 63rd meeting of Council in December 2022. Instead of what is currently represented, which is the end of fiscal year 22, which is in fact June. So that's a minor change, adding 6 months to that obligation to report, and that's the first change. The second change would be that given the timeline confirmed today by the administrator of the launch of the UNDP Enterprise Resource Planning System, to be completed in 2022, and the time that is required for behavior change to catch up with the new system thereafter. The Secretariat does acknowledge that December 2022 is likely to be too early for the initiation of the final third-party review contemplated in our discussions. And so the suggestion is instead to consider that UNDP would submit an updated self-assessment and that the Secretariat would coordinate a review of the same by December 2022, and that UNDP would then submit an updated self-assessment that the Secretariat, on which the Secretariat would coordinate the final third-party review to be presented to Council in June 2024. This final review would benefit from a full year of implementation of the UNDP ERP system, as well as from the findings of the next OAI report. And this proposal is in line with Australia's suggestion presented yesterday of conducting essentially a first lighter review of progress in December of next year, 2022, to be followed by the final third-party review, which will have the full benefit of implementation. Thirdly, and that's the last change, we propose to add to the decision text the suggestion presented by Switzerland concerning the continuation of the risk-based screening of UNDP projects that we've been having underway for the past year. The text submitted earlier would be accepted as is, except perhaps for the proposed date. We would like to suggest for Council to reconsider the need for this requirement in December 2023, since this is a more realistic time frame for implementation of all measures proposed by UNDP. So again, what we propose to do with these three changes is to include them in the draft and circulate in short order for your consideration the modified draft of the decision, which could then be taken up tomorrow morning at the onset of tomorrow's agenda for decision. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Francois, so much. Unfortunately, we went very quickly from the executive session to the open session, and I wanted to give council members some extra time to react to what Francois just mentioned. And I think that we cannot go back to our executive session, but since we'll be presenting a draft text for this council decision, we can begin tomorrow morning in another executive session just for council members and alternate, so we can have the proper space for discussion on this subject, as you will be provided with the draft text. Is this is going to be fine with what just went?
So I just want to tell you that we have Gabriela and Rob.
I was going to ask Gabriela if this is fine with her proposal. Gabriela.
Great, thank you, Carlos. Yes, the last amendment you actually made was exactly what we were going to propose. Thanks very much to the proposal from Francois. So if you could circulate the written text, because we have to also consult internally. This is an issue which is not only of interest for the council members, but also other people in the administration. So we have to check internally. And then we would strongly support the suggestion by Carlos made just now to have an executive session tomorrow morning again, so we can have a conversation about that and also about what we heard from Achim. Thank you.
So sorry for opening the session without finishing the discussion in the executive session. Rob?
Yeah, thank you. I'm just appreciate also the suggestion to have another executive session tomorrow morning, and I'm just wanting to make sure I understand the timeline. So because I was a little confused. So the decision is going to suggest, and we'll see this in writing obviously later today, so appreciate that as well, but just want to make sure I understand so that we can, you know, we can also share with other folks who are going to need to be consulted on this. It's that there will be a self-assessment in a year, and then after the self-assessment, there will be the start of a third-party review, and then the third-party review will be completed in 2024. I'm just wanting to make sure I understand the timeline here, because it was a little confusing to me. So thank you.
Thanks, Rob. Francois?
Sure. Thank you very much for seeking clarification, Rob. The idea would be that a subsequent self-assessment followed by a review of the same would be made available for the December 2022 council to council members, right? So not just the self-assessment, but also the review of the same that would, in the spirit of what Australia suggested yesterday, constitute a sort of a stock taking of where progress in implementation stands by next year at council. That would be the proposal. And then the final self-assessment following all steps taken in implementation, which would be followed by a full-blown third-party review, independent third-party review, would happen in order to secure reporting to council on the same in June 2024.
Thanks so much, Francois. So with this, we will close the executive session, and we will proceed as it was indicated. And now we will go back to our regular open session with agenda item number 6, which is reporting on the share of GEF financing in agencies' portfolios. I would like to invite Francois.
It looks like, sorry, but it looks like Alain is requesting the floor too.
Yes, Alain, please.
Yeah, thank you. Merci, Carlos Manuel. Just on the previous agenda item. No, we understand the logic of the time frame, but honestly, we regret a bit this very long time frame. Would have appreciated a bit a short time frame, and maybe having everything started already in the coming year, including the external review, so that we may have already some clarity by the end of 2022. including, the full picture of the impact of the implementation plan, because as it is planned today with the results expected in June 2024, it will give us like a full picture more than 2 years after the start of the implementation of the implementation plan. So it sounds a bit long to us, to be honest, but happy to follow the majority.
Thanks, Alain, for your additional recommendation. I will guarantee all the council members that tomorrow morning we'll have enough time for the discussion on many of the specifics of what this council what the council decision will be. Nevertheless, we'll be working today and providing you with draft text so we can have an exchange throughout the day. And tomorrow we'll lock in the session with an executive session to discuss and finalize this agenda item. Okay. Do we have any other speaker, William, on this agenda topic?
I think we can go ahead. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, William. So as I was saying, let's move over now to agenda item number 6, which is reporting on the share of GEF financing in agencies portfolio. I would like to invite Francois to introduce document GF/C61/05, the share of GEF financing in agencies portfolio, which provides information to council on the relative levels of GEF financing in each GEF agency's overall operations. Francois, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair. And I am pleased to introduce the document, the share of GEF financing in agencies' portfolios, arising from the GEF 7 replenishment discussions. Council requested that agencies begin reporting to the Secretariat on the volume of their non-GEF activities starting in June 2020. This is the second such report that has been prepared based on this information. This request happened in the context of Council's interest to better understand the applicability of a ceiling of 30% across all agencies. In other words, the applicability of securing that the total GEF financing for projects and programs that an agency has under implementation shall not make up more than 30% of the total financing for projects and programs that the agency has under implementation from all sources. This issue therefore focuses on the size of the slice of business financed by GEF in each agency's own business pie, if you would allow me this casual metaphor. And as such, the present discussion on the share of the GEF financing in agency portfolio is actually fully distinct from the issue of concentration currently under discussion in GEF 8 replenishment. Concentration relates to the share of each agency slice of the total GEF pie, if you will. In other words, to agency market share of GEF business. And this is an important distinction here. So what are the results of the agency reporting that this paper is summarizing? Now, much work has happened in GEF 7, including with the leadership of a council working group, to examine and to analyze the merits and the limitations of several methodologies intended to capture this share of the GEF financing in agency portfolio, with the view to check it against the defined ceiling of 30%. The methodology finally retained focuses on annual flows of approvals as well as annual flows of disbursements. And this is the methodology used in this paper. We are pleased to report that the information provided by agencies has shown that GEF funding does not come close to the 30% ceiling contemplated by Council when measured using either the approval or disbursement figures reported by agencies. If we take the basis of approvals, all agencies report that GEF funding account for well below 30% of their overall annual approval activity. Only 2 agencies report figures slightly over 20%. Similarly, when measured on the basis of annual disbursement, all agencies exhibit GEF cash transfers well below 30% of their totals, with only one exceeding 20%. Let me now focus on the recommended decision. There is a proposed decision related to this issue. Now, why exactly? Because it responds to a previous council request to bring a recommendation for decision to council meeting based on the experience of reporting from agencies. So we now have this information, and that is why we're in a position to present a recommendation. As demonstrated in this report and its predecessor last year, the issue of agency dependency on GEF funding has proven not to be of significant concern over the GEF 7 replenishment period to date. In addition, it is clear that continued annual reporting by agencies on the share of GEF financing in their non-GEF activity is actually not relevant to the analysis of market share, that is concentration, which is active in our discussion moving forward with GEF 8. Again, the two issues are distinct. So the proposed decision text, therefore, contains two elements in light of the lesson learned and the reported data. The first is that additional measures to address this issue are not warranted at this time. The second element relates to monitoring. The Secretariat is offering in this draft decision to continue to monitor this issue as an ongoing concern, ideally using a lighter risk-based approach, given the reporting cost that this entails for agencies, and to return to Council if any concerns were to arise in the future. Let me suggest that alternatively, this second element of the proposed decision could be removed if Council members agreed that there is limited value to further reporting on this matter in the future. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Francois, for the presentation on this report on the GEF financing in agencies portfolio. With this, I would like to open the floor for questions and comments from the council members. William, can you please be so kind and assist us with the list of speakers?
Yes, nobody's requesting the floor so far, but let's give another couple of minutes.
Yes.
Gerard has raised his hand. Gerard, you have the floor. Please remember to put your name in the chat. It's easy to follow.
Thank you, William. So maybe let me start by saying good morning, good afternoon to everybody. And would like to maybe make one or two points, especially with respect to the 30%. It is our understanding that the intent behind the application of the ceiling of 30% across all agencies is to guard against these agencies become too reliant upon GEF financing, and subsequently to give a sort of level playing field to all agencies. While we commend this in the intent, our concern pertains to the practical translation of same in reality. I would like to request for some clarification on the potential consequences that could come into effect in the event that GEF's share of an agency's portfolio were to exceed 30%. I think it is crucial here to note that future measures and implications should not be taken at the expense of a country's choice of the agency, especially in the case of LDCs and SIDS. Maybe in these type of countries, there are relatively smaller number of agencies. So we want to have the reassurance that there would be certain flexibility that will come up depending on the country's circumstances. Secondly, given that the issue of the agency dependence on GEF financing has not yet been a bit tested and proven to be an aspect of significant concern over GEF 7. In fact, our concern is that whenever this ceiling is applied, what guarantees us that there will be some proclaimed benefits? Or would it be maybe costly? Will there be some cost associated with this to the GEF? So maybe this is something that we need to reflect a bit more on this. In this regard, we also want to make the point that the 30% ceiling, whether it is going to be implemented under a differentiated approach, contingent upon specialization or size of the agency, what sort of framework will be proposed to ensure equity and fairness among the different agencies that are different size and different capacity? Back to you, William. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anna has the floor, followed by Miguel.
Thank you, William. Thank you, Mr. Chair. We understand the rationale regarding the application of a ceiling of 30% on the GEF's share of an agency's portfolio in order to rationalize the level of IA's share from the overall GEF portfolio and funding. However, our constituency believes that such rationalization should be secondary to the country's preference of the IAs to work within a given cycle. The countries in our constituency considers to the large extent that there is only one IA that works in the seeds, or the presence of the IAs at the country level as a facilitating factor. This helps countries easily access GEF resources, minimize reporting burden, and prevent disruption in project operations. The issue regarding the agency dependence on GEF funding as one of the bases for the ceiling or cap has not been proven to be of significant concern to date. Please note that the constituency is conscious of the consideration regarding the IA's absorptive capacity in implementing projects, which should still be assessed on a per-country basis to ensure smooth implementation of projects and to avoid concentration of GEF resources among agencies. The constituency believes that the key to rationalizing the GEF agency share in GEF financing is an effective and well-designed assessment of the agency's track record in terms of performing its roles, responsibilities in assisting the countries to deliver the project outputs. We support the decision to further monitor the issue in order to come up with a policy recommendation that is responsive to the needs of countries rather than looking at ensuring proper concentration across GEF agencies. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Miguel, followed by Renato. Miguel, you have the floor.
Gracias, William. La circunscripción del Cono Sur manifiesta que hay que tener en cuenta que las agencias del GEF, por diversos motivos, no son comparables al momento que un país las elige, por lo cual es muy difícil lograr equilibrio en cuanto a su participación y concentración en la cartera de proyectos del GEF. En la práctica, el universo de agencias posibles de ser elegidas para un proyecto se reduce a un número limitado dependiendo del país o región. Se debe considerar que existen agencias nacionales, agencias del ámbito regional, agencias que tienen una especificidad temática y técnica en particular, y su presencia o no con una oficina o representación en el país, entre otros factores. También hay que considerar el interés de cada agencia en particular. No siempre están disponibles y algunas no tienen mayor interés en proyectos específicos. Por otro lado, la selección de las agencias es una decisión de cada país de acuerdo a su realidad, a su historial de relaciones con las diversas agencias y la conveniencia práctica. El punto focal operativo es fundamental en la selección, indicando cuál agencia entrega más ventajas comparativas y pertinencia temática, siendo esta selección una situación de caso a caso. Es importante fomentar que un país trabaje con la mayor diversidad de agencias posibles, lo cual también es muy variable país por país. En este caso puedo nombrar que Chile tiene una cartera de proyectos con la participación de 8 agencias, que es el máximo posible considerando las ventajas comparativas. Finalmente, apoyamos la propuesta de decisión. Muchas gracias.
Muchas gracias. Renato, you have the floor.
Thank you, William. And good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone. On behalf of the constituents of Brazil, Colombia, and Ecuador, we welcome this decision. And while we agree that additional measures are not warranted at this time, we also believe that 30% agency ceiling may not contribute to the achieving of GEF Core's objective, which we understand must be the element that guides GEF decisions. Moreover, limiting the share of the GEF projects an agency has under implementation can affect some countries' capacity to achieve their environmental goals in case where few alternative funding sources are available. So also in support of what Miguel, Gerard, and other colleagues have said before, my constituency believes that the countries must retain the freedom of choice of agencies to best respond to national circumstances. In this regard, it is key to continue to strengthen the operational focal points, capacities to decide on which agencies best represent national interest on each project. Thank you. Back to you.
Thank you, Renato. Liesl, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. Our constituency welcomes the report, and we agree with the conclusion that during GEF 8, more focus will be needed to be on the separate issue of concentration of GEF funding amongst the agencies. Nevertheless, this report indicates that for some agencies, funding from the GEF is important for their operations. So therefore, we have a couple of questions that we would like to be looked at a little more closely. One of them is whether there is a correlation between the GEF percentage funding of the agency's total funding and co-financing of these agencies. The other is, how does GEF funding affect core priorities and core funding of agencies that receive a lot of funding from the GEF? Do projects contribute to achieving the main goals of the agency's strategy? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Liesl Laverne, you have the floor.
Thank you. Sorry about that. I'm having some technical difficulties. Members of the constituency commend the Secretariat for its efforts in undertaking this work, particularly in devising a methodology that will address the issue in light of the differences in mandates, models, and fiscal years, and report periods across GEF agencies, as well as the impact of the timing of GEF funding approvals and commitments, cancellations, and the nature of the GEF and agencies' funding cycles. However, we note that all agencies cannot be assessed in the same manner. For example, some agencies have a global presence, such as UNDP and the World Bank. Others are nationally accredited agencies, which only allow for a national operation model, and they are the regional financial institutions that occupy a middle ground serving countries in their regional space. Taking into account the guidance given and the methodology utilized based on approvals, all of the GEF agencies' portfolios indicate that the GEF funding accounts for well below 30% of the annual approval activity, with only 2 agencies slightly over 20%, and the overall average being 5%. Also, when assessed based on GEF cash transfers, all agencies exceeding 20%, and the overall average being 4.6%. To this end, we concur that the agencies are not dependent upon the GEF for financing, and that additional measures are not required at this time. However, through ongoing monitoring, a concern arises, the Secretariat should submit the necessary report with appropriate recommendation or recommendations for consideration. The Caribbean constituency uses this opportunity to reiterate the following. 1, the GEF resources reflected in the portfolio of the agencies is indicative of the decisions of recipient countries. The Council is reminded that this is in line with ensuring country ownership in the formulation and implementation of initiatives and should always remain paramount. The support of the Council is solicited in this regard. 2, attention should be given on to the level of engagement undertaken by the agencies and programs put forward by countries in order to reduce the increasing pressure for such resources to be brought to the table solely by member states. 3, consideration of additional regional and national institutions, particularly those that serve the Caribbean, for accreditation in order to widen the number of agencies that will be available to recipient countries for partnership. Therefore, the following is again recommended to aid in this process. The development of a baseline assessment on the GEF website through a portal where regional and national institutions can undertake a quick evaluation of their operations to ascertain whether they do have the basic capacity and institutional arrangement. 2, a means of support established under the country support program that can be used to lend aid to institutions in strengthening the identified shortcomings. And 3, as the GEF aims to enhance coherence, complementarity, and collaboration with other mechanisms, that consideration be given to the inclusion of regional and national institutions which have been successful in achieving accreditation under another mechanism with equally robust fiduciary, environmental, social, and gender policies and safeguards to reduce the cost and time implications to the institutions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Laverne. Since there was a bit of a technical difficulty, you might want to just send us those things in writing so that we can reflect them accurately later on in the highlights. So next is Alain from France, please.
Merci, William. Nous remercions le secrétariat pour ce document qui permet de constater que sur la période FEM7 à date, le sujet de la dépendance ne semble pas avoir été une problématique majeure. Et nous vous remercions encore d'avoir mené toute l'analyse. Notons toutefois que les agences ont des modèles et des spécificités thématiques différentes. Et du coup, nous souhaiterions savoir si le secrétariat a pu évaluer la part des financements liés au FEM dans le total des activités liées à l'environnement spécifique des agences et si nous pourrions avoir les résultats en fait, de cette analyse. En effet, nous pensons qu'il serait pertinent de comparer ces pourcentages dans le cadre des activités, décaissement et approbation, des agences qui sont liées à l'environnement et non pas dans la part totale de l'activité des alliances. Donc, une analyse plus spécifique nous paraît nécessaire. Enfin, comme souligné par le secrétariat, nous souhaitons réitérer ici que le sujet de la concentration est bien distinct du sujet de la dépendance. Et dans le contexte des discussions de reconstitution en cours pour la période du FEM 8, nous souhaitons redire que nous encourageons le secrétariat à fournir une analyse détaillée et des options qui permettraient de traiter le problème de la concentration actuelle des agences dans le portefeuille du FEM. D'une part, du point de vue des pays récipiendaires, bien entendu, et d'autre part, du point de vue des agences de mise en œuvre elles-mêmes. Et je pense que le cas du PNUD, dont on a longuement parlé hier aujourd'hui, illustre bien les problèmes soulevés par une forte concentration des agences. Merci.
Merci, Alain. Ben, you have the floor.
Thanks, William. Let me just first say in technical points, it's great if we can just make sure that the translator and the speakers' volumes are distinct. I couldn't hear very much of Chile's comments. Just in terms of this issue, though, I agree that I think with what France said, that we need to be mindful of concentration issues and recognize that we're discussing that issue as part of the GEF 8 discussions. I think this paper demonstrates, for whatever reason, this helps us. This paper doesn't answer the questions on concentration. So we totally agree with the decision being proposed, and we could, as Francois asked, we could live with this without the second part of that decision. We also recognize the strong comments being made by recipient countries. I think it's quite good that we're taking this decision because it's removing a reporting burden, because I think the council is constantly adding reporting burden. So actually removing something
librándonos de un requisito de reportar y demostrar que podemos hacer todas estas cosas.
As a matter of concentration issues, it throws at some rather interesting points in terms of actually there's a lot of agencies with 0%, I think in the paper, like EBRD and IPI, the International Development Bank as well. And so I think actually I think one can say that this paper actually throws up some interesting answers, but it's to the wrong question. So in short, we support the decision. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Brenda, you have the floor.
Muchas gracias, William, y muy buen día.
Thank you, William. And good day, good evening, or good afternoon to everyone from Costa Rica, El Salvador, Guatemala, Honduras, Mexico, Nicaragua.
Tomamos nota del reporte y consideramos importante tener más detalles sobre la forma en la que se está llevando a cabo este análisis. No hay claridad sobre si el 30% es en relación al portafolio de cada agencia o al 30% de la cartera del GEF. Por otro lado, quiero hacer eco de los comentarios hechos por mis colegas de Brasil y Chile. El tema de concentración de las agencias es muy relevante para nosotros y como región consideramos importante que cada país tenga la libertad de elegir la agencia con la que desea trabajar. Muchas gracias.
Muchas gracias, Brenda. Julio, you have the floor.
Thank you, William. Thank you, everyone. Just want to apologize first because I'm having some problems with my camera on the tablet. And this is just to say on behalf of Southern Africa constituency, to say that we welcome and we support the report. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That ends the list of speakers. Back to you, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks, William, and thanks to every single council member that took the floor. I would like to pass it over to Françoise so she can answer questions and react to comments. And please, Françoise, explain us on the draft text decision that we're proposing here.
Thanks very much, Chair, and thank you, council members, for comments and questions. Let me first restate, and it's been highlighted by a number of you, that indeed this paper is not addressing directly the issue of concentration. It may provide, as the UK noticed along the way, some useful data points, but the purpose is not to discuss or address the issue of concentration, that is market share of the GEF, of the market share in the GEF overall financing of each individual agency, but is addressing the issue of potential dependence of agencies on GEF financing. So this is an important distinction, and indeed we have an ongoing conversation in GEF 8, which is directly addressing the issue of concentration. So one implication of that is that this paper is in no ways proposing or representing to make changes to the options that countries have, represented by their OFPs, to make decision about the agencies that they wish to work with. And it is actually a very important point because a number of you have addressed it, including Chile, Mexico, Brazil, and Philippines. And we're very mindful that in the work that led over time and during GEF 7 to the production of this final paper, including work led by the working group of Council on that topic, there was ample evidence, including full surveys, feedback, and direct consultations with countries, that countries saw the importance of not reducing the choices of agencies that they encounter, particularly when a part of constituencies where they already feel that there is a limited choice. So again, there's no such intent here, and there would not be any such consequences by any of the adopted decision. And the principle supported by countries on this has been, in fact, inputted into our thinking over time and is now part of the discussion we're having on concentration. So that's a very important point to acknowledge. A related point is, but subject to the same disclaimer, if you will, is that issues, of course, of country capacity and OFP's capacities and space for ownership and leadership in decisions are very important issues that we are also addressing somewhere else in our discussions, in particular over the objectives and the modalities of the country support program. And this paper has no intent here or effect to limit them. Another important point here raised by a number of you, including France, is that there are inherent differences in the overall missions of agencies, and therefore the proportion of their GEF involvement over their total involvement, if you will, is of course subject or affected by the specialty that they may have. To give a practical example, I mean, an agency focused on environment is expected to have a much higher proportional financing from GEF than an agency which is focusing on development at large, and therefore has a much broader footprint of in its strategy, which is also the point raised by Netherlands. And this issue, which notes a structural difference across the agencies accredited with GEF in their mission, and therefore their focus on opportunities that match the mandate of GEF, is a very important observation, and it is one that has led over time to a lot of the methodological reflection on this topic, which has resulted in the presentation of the decisions that we're doing today. So I think there's a high congruence across the comments made on all of this, some of them that we're happy to lift into the discussions that are currently ongoing on concentration. When it comes to the specific issue of the share of GEF financing in agencies' portfolio, I heard substantial consensus over the need to move ahead with a decision, and we are left with this issue of whether or not some further light risk-based monitoring is still in order. Currently, this is what's being proposed in the drafted decision, and I heard consent on this coming from a couple of you, including the UK, that the second provision could possibly be removed, the consideration here being one of the imposition of reporting cost that comes to agencies. We are open-minded either way. Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks, Francois. With this, we will be closing the discussion on this agenda items. Just a second. And I would like to invite council members to adopt the draft decision that is included in document GF/C61/05. I see nobody requesting the floor or making observations to the approval of the draft decision. So we approve the decision. Thank you so much.
I think sorry. I think I've missed, after Julio, we missed both Spain and UK. So maybe Marta and Ben would like to take the floor. Marta?
Thank you, William. Indeed, I asked the floor before considering the decision, and we do support the decision. We do not have a point on that. I was just taking into account of Francois' response. I just wanted to highlight that this is very relevant information for us, as it's important to understand which is the role of the GEF for other institutions. And indeed, I want to highlight that I think there is some, I would like to ask to understand whether there's any correlation between the issue of dependency and concentration, in the sense that could be that an entity has a lot of dependency on GEF. That means that it do needs to have a important role as well on the portfolio of the GEF. So in this sense, I would like and also to get some lessons from this also in terms of the concentration issue. That's it. Thank you. But we don't have any issue regarding the decision. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ben, you have the floor.
Yeah, sorry to take the floor again. It was just that in terms of what Francois summing up was that maybe a couple of people, including ourselves, were saying that we could live without the second bit of the decision. I guess that maybe the intention of no one else adding to this commenting is suggesting that everyone is happy with the decision as it is. We'd be happy with that if that's the sort of general consensus of the council. So we're happy to go forward on that basis. It was just that Francois left a certain amount of doubt in terms of her answer. So I just want to just make sure we're 100% clear that we're going forward with the decision as drafted in the paper. Many thanks.
Thanks. Anybody else in the speaking list, William?
That seems to be it for now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So Marta, thanks for your questions. Through the many different analyses that we had made, there is no correlationship between dependency and concentration. And we are working on both, but so far there is no correlationship in that respect. And we will be keeping track on both of them and informing to council. Also in terms of dependency, the analysis that we have done, we don't see that we are getting into a kind of risk zone with regards to dependency with any of the implementing agency, and we use international criteria to assess that. And we will be continue working on that analysis and providing data to council. On concentration, yes, thanks. I agree with everybody's comments on the issue of concentration, something that we've been talking a lot in the replenishment conversations since the second replenishment meeting that we had last September. We've been following a set of different actions in terms of analyzing the options and having conversations with many different implementing agencies. I want to really underline the fact that we need to put attention not just on concentration, but also the overall performance of all agencies. Some of those agencies' performance in terms of portfolio share is very low. Also on the fact that it's hard to do an objective analysis of concentration on all agencies, as some of those agencies has a global reach and other just a national presence. Nevertheless, we understand and we work on the concentration issue because of how important and relevant it is. And I'm confident that we are moving forward in terms of diversifying and minimizing the risks associated to high concentration on one or three agencies, as it has been expressed by many donors and council members within council meetings and the replenishment meetings. Francois, any additional comments on your side?
No, thank you, Chair.
Okay. Well, good. So I would once more ask for consult on the approval of the draft text proposed for this agenda item. I see no objections to this proposed text, so it has been approved by council. Thank you so much. Thanks, Francois. Now we go to agenda item number 9, the seventh comprehensive evaluation of the GEF, working towards a greener global recovery and management response. I'm really pleased to pass it over to our co-chair, Mette. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Carlos Manuel. I will now very soon invite Mr. Juha Witto, Director of the Independent Evaluation Office, to present the evaluation of GEF 7. This document has been presented informally at the replenishment meetings, yet this is the first time it is being presented officially to the Council, and we will follow with the discussion by the Council members. So please, Juha, the floor is yours to present the evaluation.
Thank you, Madam Co-Chair. Let me get my ducks lined up here. And good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone, wherever you may be. This agenda item focuses on the 7th comprehensive evaluation of the GEF, or OPS 7. The OPS 7 executive summary has been provided as a working document, and the full report is an information document to this meeting. At the very end, I will also provide a few updates on where we are heading next, as well as a few recent knowledge sharing initiatives. So on to my presentation. Terminal evaluations underpin the data and ratings presented in OPS 7. We have included the most recent annual performance report as an information document, which includes the cohort of terminal evaluations received in 2020, about 100 of them. This can be considered an annex to OPS 7, presenting only the latest data point. They do confirm what appears to be a trend in improvement in ratings for sustainability, M&E design, and the quality of the terminal evaluations themselves. Performance on other criteria is similar to other closed projects. COVID-19 has impacted the implementation of GEF projects. In fact, most of them, something like 88% report this. But project teams have also adopted measures to counter the issues with a shift to virtual implementation, and a third have requested extensions. This is in line with what was discussed in the context of the annual monitoring report yesterday. I just also wanted to take the opportunity to inform you that following our disclosure policies, we will have all the data, validated ratings, and the actual terminal evaluations available on our website by the time of the next council meeting and assembly. This is how it will look like. The data by region and then by country will be available by clicking on the map. You can access regional and country data. When you click on a country, you can get details of all projects in that country, including performance ratings and access to the detailed reports on completed projects. Here we've just put up the data on Uruguay, which is one of the early countries we've completed on the website. You can't quite go to and access it yet, but soon you will be able. And here are further details on the evidence base underlying OPS 7. We conducted altogether 34 evaluations and covered a portfolio of 5,000 projects. So these evaluations and OPS 7 as a whole provided a lot of detail. Here I am only going to cover the main conclusions and recommendations. The detailed findings and evidence are included in the report. So the first conclusion is that the GEF continues to be highly relevant. The GEF focal area strategies continue to respond to conventions, and the shift to integrated programming has not negatively affected this. GEF projects and programs are relevant both to addressing contemporary environmental challenges and country strategies. The GEF continues to deliver on its strong performance record. This second conclusion is based on evidence of the performance at the portfolio, country, and focal area levels and impacts. 80% of the projects are rated as satisfactory on outcomes and 68% on sustainability. Sustainability has been improving and continues to do so, and generally improves over time as our post-completion assessments have shown. On achievement of targets, we have a mixed picture as 7 out of the 13 targets established in GEF 5, which is the latest GEF period for which we have data, are on track to be achieved. There have been particular challenges with a shortfall towards the targets related to sustainable landscape management. This too was briefly discussed yesterday in connection with the annual monitoring report. At the country level, we observe variations in outcomes and performance based on country groups, pointing to the importance of country contexts, such as fragile and conflict-affected situations. It would be important to take into account in the design and implementation of programs and projects. While the GEF high recipient countries are prominently featured in integrated programs, few SIDS especially feature in these programs. The country support program has been a useful tool of engagement in sharing information about GEF policies, access to GEF financing, and programming. However, participation has been varied and often limited, even with respect to the OFPs, and particularly the private sector. Similarly, the timing of national dialogues has not been optimal for planning for GEF's engagement in countries. Then, coming to the integrated programming, which we all know has increased substantially since GEF 5. We put a lot of effort into evaluating the integrated approaches, although the actual results on the ground are yet too early to be measured. Our evaluations verify an improvement in the design and rollout of the GEF 7 impact programs over the earlier integrated approach pilots. The theories of change are clearer, the knowledge platforms are better tailored for country needs, and there has been more emphasis on cross-cutting issues. Yet, challenges continue on a few fronts, including in terms of coordination among the ministries involved and cooperation among GEF agencies. Importantly, the demonstration of additionality of the programs is still insufficient. We also noted a need for a greater country diversity and inclusion in the programs. The focal areas remain central to the GEF's program, of course. Having done broad focal area studies for OPS 6, we this time went deep into a particular theme in each focal area. In biodiversity, we focused on biodiversity mainstreaming, which GEF support has enabled in targeted sectors, institutions, policies, and territories with globally significant biodiversity. This has been facilitated by good governance, alignment with national development priorities, and stakeholder engagement. But capturing additionalities such as socioeconomic and environmental impacts of GEF-supported mainstreaming intervention is a challenge. In climate change, we focused on sustainable transport, where the GEF has made valuable contributions to facilitating the use of low-carbon technologies, enhancing the efficiency of public transit and freight transport, promoting non-motorized transport and energy efficiency benchmarking for marine transport. The GEF has facilitated market transformation for electric and hybrid and fuel cell-based mobility technologies and helped lay the groundwork for BRT systems in several major cities. GEF support for transport planning and traffic demand management activities generally focus on the development or update of a city master plan or an mobility strategy. The transport planning and demand management activities were successful where these did not impose additional costs on a group of stakeholders. Where trade-offs were required, the commitment from political leadership and public support is crucial. The projects did face challenges in three main areas of procurement, coordination, and monitoring and evaluation. Because sustainable transport projects are complex, and coordination among a wide range of stakeholders was a challenge for several projects. In chemicals and waste, we did an in-depth evaluation of GEF's interventions in small-scale and artisanal gold mining. We found that there had been a shift based on learning from earlier experiences. The focus on regulatory reform and access to finance has been important in addressing the constraints to reduction in mercury use. The new knowledge platforms are fostering a lot of exchange. In sustainable forest management, we conducted a case study in Uganda, bringing for the first time together environmental data from remote sensing with World Bank household survey data. The study demonstrated the power of using existing information and remote tools while field work was a challenge. These types of tools may be useful also for the future, both in terms of utilizing a variety of tools and combining environmental and socioeconomic data. We observed positive socioeconomic co-benefits in areas in close proximity to GEF interventions, along with a notable reduction in deforestation. We will provide a more comprehensive evaluation of sustainable forest management to the June 2022 Council meeting. In international waters, the study on fisheries demonstrated GEF's additionality in promoting transboundary ecosystem-based governance and the socioeconomic co-benefits in terms of increased income, food security, and women's empowerment. While overall, the focal area strategies have responded to the guidance of their respective conventions, there has been a shortfall in achievement of GEF 5 targets, as mentioned before. There is also a need for better monitoring and reporting on the actual achievement of targets. So the third conclusion is that the GEF continues to be a robust and adaptive partnership. The GEF partnership comprises agencies that are among the leading finance, development, and environmental organizations, and the GEF itself continues to play an important convening role. However, we have noted unhealthy competition among agencies, the absence of a clear and coherent strategy at the country level, and cumbersome administrative processes in a number of programs. These include the MSPs and the NGI, but are not limited to them. Regarding the GEF's engagement with the private sector, we note the need for a differentiated approach to dealing with various types of private sector entities and a need to promote understanding of GEF policies and programs with the private sector. The NGI has promoted innovation and risk-taking, but the administrative processes would benefit from further streamlining. We will review the implementation of the private sector engagement strategy in a couple of years when some experiences have been gained with its implementation. Conclusion 4. The GEF continues to be a source of predictable financing for countries. The STAR provides predictable environmental finance to countries, and the GEF has been able to mobilize substantial co-financing. However, there still remains a need to mobilize additional resources, of course, to fulfill its ambitious programming requirements. And this would imply diversifying the donor base and more private financing. Conclusion 5, the GEF supports policy reforms. However, advancing policy coherence will require substantial efforts. The GEF is valued for its work on policy reform, capacity building, and institutional strengthening, and these are often amongst the most effective ways of support. According to its mandate, these activities have been primarily focused on the environmental sector, of course. Building policy coherence will require significant efforts on the part of the GEF and the countries where often there is a lack of coherence between sector economic plans and environmental objectives. And then over to conclusion 6, which pertains to the 3 implementation modalities, the enabling activities, the medium-sized projects, and the SGP that all serve their intended purpose. But there is, of course, as always, room to enhance their effectiveness even further. The enabling activities have supported countries in convention reporting, but we observe some inefficiencies in disbursement and implementation that can be addressed. The MSPs have served as good entry points for newer agencies especially, and they do encourage innovation. But a 2-step approval process in particular is administratively cumbersome for relatively small projects. The SGP is the only window for small-scale, local, and especially civil society partners. But the SGP would need reforms to its governance and especially the upgrading policy to live up to its potential. The 7th conclusion, the GEF supports innovation and often prepares the groundwork for scaling up, not only by itself, but by other donors as well. Innovative projects are often associated with transformational change and a higher value added. Scaling up takes time, but often generates efficiencies if accompanied by adaptive management and knowledge sharing. Conclusion 8. GEF policies and systems are consistent with good practice. There has been progress on the implementation of the policies on gender, safeguards, and stakeholder inclusion. The implementation of the policies needs to be strengthened, as well as the monitoring of this implementation. The IPAG, the Indigenous Peoples Advisory Group, has gained credibility significantly, although it could be better known. But the CSO network has weakened. The GEF Gender Partnership is now a strong knowledge sharing forum. We will evaluate the fiduciary policy over the next year or so. The results-based management and knowledge management systems continue to improve and respond to the recommendations that we have put forth earlier. The quality of information on the GEF portal is improving. There is still a need to capture program-level results and socioeconomic indicators, as I have mentioned earlier already. The knowledge platforms are effective in facilitating knowledge exchange. But overall, the partnership would benefit from more project-level guidance on integrating knowledge management. Also, a technical solution to the effective capture and storage of knowledge is still needed. So, over to recommendations. And we offer a number of recommendations that are directly linked to the conclusions that I have just presented. There are a number of ways to group the recommendations, and for the purposes of this presentation, I suggest that they are centered around the following broad categories or actions. Strategy, which includes the need for the integrated programs to better demonstrate their additionality, as well as for the SGP to further expand its vision and impact potential. The effectiveness and efficiency of the various processes in the partnership. How the GEF engages with and in countries. Innovation and the associated risk. And the various policies and systems that enable monitoring and measuring progress. The recommendations are all listed on this slide, but I won't get into the details right now, as they will be covered in the discussion on the management response, I am sure. But let me say a couple of words on our thoughts about our future work program now that the OPS 7 is done. We have had some discussions with the agencies and the GEF Secretariat, and would also appreciate, of course, your inputs now and in the future. Here are just some of our early thoughts on our work program. Much of it follows directly on where OPS 7 left off. Like we need to do more work on evaluating the additionality of the impact programs, and we'll also now have the opportunity to finally do separate evaluations of the earlier integrated approach pilots. We also want to align with the emerging GEF 8 policy agenda and the programming directions, including the focus on One Health and policy influence. You will hear more from us on these plans in the coming meetings. So this is just a teaser, kind of. We've also continued to stay engaged with the various evaluation networks, such as the UN Evaluation Group, the Global Evaluation Initiative established by the World Bank's Independent Evaluation Group with UNDP's IEO, and global and regional evaluation associations. We're also developing an environmental training module for IPDET, which is the premier evaluation training program for international development practitioners. And we also plan to develop an online training module that will be available on demand. And finally, we recently launched this book on environmental evaluation and global development institutions, a case study of the GEF, which draws on the findings of OPS 6. What motivated us to write the book is the fact that these types of comprehensive evaluations are really very rare, and there are some broader lessons to be drawn. I'd like to thank especially Gabriela of Switzerland and our CEO, Carlos Manuel, for participating in the book launch, and your former council colleague, Stefan Schwager, for writing a foreword for the book. You will all receive a copy of this book within the next couple of weeks, as we just received them in the office. You will see that many of the findings of the book are still very relevant today in the context of the current replenishment. So I thank you for your attention and of course open to all of your comments. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Juha, for this presentation, and also very interesting to hear about your book. Looking forward to receive that. We will now hear from the Secretariat of their management response to the evaluation. First, I will invite Carlos Manuel to say some words before the word is passed on to Sonia, Gustavo, and Francoise.
Well, thank you so much, Mette, and thanks to you for the presentation of OPS 7. We very much welcome the report, and we appreciate the rigorous and dedicated work of the independent evaluation officer, which continues to guide us in the wider GEF partnership. As you can see from the style of our management response, we are fully adopting the recommendation of the governance working group to the 59th Council, the findings of the IEO peer review report for the 58th Council, as well as the many calls from Council members to have more detailed and analytical management response to all IEO evaluations. We have heard IEO and we have responded accordingly. We hope that you are pleased with the new format. This mode we adopt now from now on, and we will continue to refine this approach according to your feedback as we move forward. And at the same time, in order to prepare these types of responses, we have to undertake in-depth internal processes and analysis. And yes, indeed, it does take time. As a matter of fact, the IEO peer review evaluation states that a reasonable time span for the preparation of a credible management response is 4 weeks, and that 2 weeks is a short time for developing a realistic plan of action on recommendations that at times require complex responses. But well, nevertheless, we are happy with the new format and doing our best to fully comply with the best standards and of course on the Council decisions on these topics. So in pursuit of this new style of management response, we have encountered an unforeseen structural disconnect in the present systems where IEO evaluation requires to be posted 4 weeks before Council. This does not leave us with enough time to prepare a detailed management response, and we would propose ways by which we can overcome this very challenging situation. Nevertheless, this late or disconnect has led to some late posting of this management response, as you all have seen, and our apologies for this situation with all Council members. But in recognition of these, we are already in discussions with IEO, and we'll be working with them to see how best we can solve this in time for the next set of evaluations and associated management response to come in the near future, as I just indicated. So with this, I would like to ask Sonia, Gustavo, and Francois to highlight the key points of our response to these reports. Thank you, and over to you, Sonia.
Thank you, Carlos Manuel. First, let me express our thanks to the IEO for this timely, relevant, and rigorous piece of work. We very much welcome the report, and we appreciate the report's 9 recommendations. These are going to continue to help guide us, both the Secretariat and the wider GEF partnership in continued and positive progress. As you would have seen from Juha's presentation just now, the OPS 7 is an umbrella report, and close to 30 component evaluations upon which this report builds have already been put forward to Council over the last 3 years. As such, many findings and recommendations are already being incorporated into the ongoing implementation of GEF 7 and also into the draft GEF 8 programming and policy directions of the GEF 8 replenishment process. So we will continue to work on the implementation of the recommendations, both of this report and of its underlying component studies,
together with GEF Council, the IAO, of course, staff, the agencies, the countries, and the wider GEF partnership. The Secretariat is encouraged by the many positive findings and conclusions of this report. At the same time, we also acknowledge the various challenges identified, and we welcome the report's articulation through its 9 high-level recommendations of the opportunities for further improvement. So now let me turn to Gustavo and Francoise to respond briefly to each of these. Gustavo will respond to the 4 recommendations on integrated programming, priority country groups, private sector engagement, and innovation and risk. And Francoise will respond to the 5 recommendations on the small grants program, administrative processes, synergies and cooperation among agencies, country engagement, and policies and systems. So Gustavo, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll try to be brief, given we're going to be covering a lot of ground here with several management responses. Starting with the first one on recommendation number 1 on integrated programming, for which we agree that establishing clarity on roles, better coordination among agencies, and monitoring, reporting, acknowledgement, management responsibilities are very important. They're imperative, as a matter of fact, for program success. These are critical aspects of integrated programming, and they will be explicitly built into the design and the monitoring and on implementation of the integrated approaches going forward. The Secretariat, in consultation with the agencies, will also work on an updated terms of reference for lead agencies of programs that will address all of these dimensions. And in addition, the Secretariat will make use of several requirements that are already codified in guidelines specifically for the integrated programs in order to track overall performance. All of these processes and steps have already been presented and discussed in the draft note, in the draft that we presented note on operationalizing the GEF 8 integrated programs that was included in the documentation in the second meeting of the GEF 8 replenishment. But these will be further refined as many of you requested. The criteria for country participation in each one of these IPs will be taken into consideration, including the commitment to nature-based solutions, to stakeholder engagement, innovative finance, and all the relevant policies. The global coordination platforms are also key to bringing together diverse stakeholders and establishing the knowledge management base, as well as to strengthen private sector engagement. All of these dimensions will be strengthened through the GEF 8 integrated programs as it has been articulated in the proposed GEF 8 programming directions. I will now move on to the recommendation number 6 of the priority groups, the priority country groups. I'd like to state initially that GEF programming has always paid special and increasing attention to the needs of priority countries. One of the objectives of the proposed GEF 8 programming is to assist vulnerable countries in the ongoing efforts to tackle the major drivers of environmental degradation and achieve systems change. The Secretariat is also working on the GEF 8 star formulation that includes enhancements that will increase the distribution of resources to SIDS and to LDCs. The 2 non-star focal areas of international waters and chemicals and waste are characterized by significant programming already to some of these countries, while the LDCF, SSCF funds also continue to be noteworthy providers of resources in this regard. The Secretariat has already taken steps to enhance greater diversification of these countries in the integrated programs proposed for GEF 8. And indeed, one of these programs is specifically focused on supporting green and blue recovery in small island developing states. With respect to capacity building across all these SIDS and SIDS, the Secretariat would like to point to the ongoing development of the GEF 8 country engagement strategy described in response to the preceding recommendation. With respect to country context in fragile and conflict affected situations, the Secretariat is in the process of building upon the extensive range of innovative guidance of many of the GEF agencies to develop internal guidance on conflict-sensitive programming. Moving on to the evaluation on private sector engagement and recommendation number 7 in particular, we agree that the efficiency of the private sector engagement could be improved with a narrow focus and more specific targets. In the draft GEF 8 programming directions, each integrated program has now a dedicated section related to the private sector, and we will be implementing these directives. We have not determined separate approaches or parallel processes for the private sector, but rather will ensure that the IEPs builds the private sector engagement into the processes at an early stage. We agree that there's a need to work more closely with the private sector to better articulate the value proposition of the GEF and to better develop an understanding of GEF processes among major private sector stakeholders. To meet this objective, the Secretariat is working through numerous fora, such as the World Business Council on Sustainable Development, the World Economic Forum, and others, to bolster the general level of understanding about the GEF and its relevant policies and guidelines. In addition, the Secretariat will continue to work strategically, placing staff experts into multi-stakeholder platforms, working groups, and initiatives. Take into account the key role that MSME actors in the creation of durability of GEBs, the Secretariat is actively seeking collaborations and scaling up opportunities that engage value chains or multiple landscape partners. The Blended Finance Global Program, or also called the NGI window, will seek to identify mechanisms to enroll financial intermediaries as executing partners who can expand services to underserved MSMEs and also smallholder farmers. We will also continue to work with our agencies to foster project pipelines that take into account opportunities to leverage the resources of the private sector. And finally, on my side, innovation and risk. I'm turning to recommendation number 8 on innovation and risk. Innovation has been and continues to be an integral component of the business practice of the GEF. As also recommended by the medium-sized project evaluation, the MSP modality will continue to be used for developing innovative projects. During the GEF 8 cycle, the Secretariat will review policies and guidelines with a view to streamlining the project cycle across all project modalities. The Secretariat agrees that it's critical to define an acceptable appetite for risk, and their recommendation recognizes that this needs must be addressed jointly by members of the GEF partnership, all members of the GEF partnership. Therefore, the Secretariat will seek guidance from both staff and the GEF Council so as to examine the trade-off of risk versus innovation with an aim to establishing a clear baseline for risk acceptance in GEF 8 programming and to a risk assessment in the ongoing projects and programs included in the GEF portfolio. The Secretariat is also exploring the possibilities for the new funding modalities and windows in GEF 8 that can provide the flexibility that is desired for increased innovation, building on the ongoing GEF engagements with innovation investments such as the NGI window and the challenge program of the LDCF Trust Fund. Finally, the Secretariat has embraced the recommendation to create a specific window for financing innovation with a higher risk tolerance, which will be included in the GEF 8 proposed programming directions submitted to the 3rd replenishment meeting. Let me now turn over to Francoise to address the 5 additional recommendations. Francoise, over to you.
Thank you, Gustavo. I will now address IEO's recommendations number 2, 3, 4, 5, and 9. So starting with recommendation number 2 on the small grants program. We welcome this recommendation, and we will be working with UNDP and with the SGP Steering Committee in its implementation. We welcome the recommendation to reappraise the long-term vision for the SGP. And for this to happen, we are committed to facilitating a broad-based consultative process for which several steps have already been initiated and will be continuing to build on these efforts. We appreciate the findings and the conclusions related to the potential need to re-examine the upgrading policy. In consultation with the UNDP, we will take stock of the current upgrading policy, and we will discuss the feasibility of adopting different criteria and operational modalities moving forward. The proposed GEF8 SGP strategy that was presented to the second replenishment meeting, which is already reflecting an increased ambition and approach, reflects this commitment. We intend to move forward an SGP 2.0, starting with GEF8 and continuing beyond. This proposed strategy suggests in particular piloting a new financial window for other GEF agencies to strategically channel financing and to support the delivery of future GEF projects and programs. We are therefore uplifting IEO's recommendation on SGP into our SGP strategy for GEF8. Turning now to recommendation number 3 on administrative.
Françoise, I think you are muted.
Sorry about that. That just happened, right? Let me start again. Let me start again with the recommendation number 3 on administrative processes. We welcome this recommendation, even as we note that the time for preparation and approval is dependent on a number of variables, many of which are not within the direct control of the Secretariat. We also note that movements along the stage of the project cycle through implementation and execution are mostly in the hands of the GEF agencies, in their collaboration, of course, with countries. We further observe that the need for greater speed in project preparation and implementation must be seen in the context of the Secretariat's adherence to the existing policies and operational standards as requested and approved by Council. So that is our context for taking on board the recommendation from IEO on administrative processes. Over the years, we have indeed adopted a coherent set of policies and guidelines, setting out principles and requirements for increasing the quality and the delivery of projects and programs. We have made progress on quality, undoubtedly. The Secretariat will nevertheless, in the coming months, be revisiting its suite of operational policies, procedures, and guidelines to determine what adjustments can be made along the lines of the recommendation. The Secretariat would also like to point to its efforts and innovation to improve the quality of monitoring throughout GEF7. With the launch of the portal in GEF7, the quality of the data submitted by agencies has considerably improved, in turn supporting strengthened reporting. Similarly, country fact sheets, for instance, are now assisting OFPs in managing their portfolio. And looking ahead to GEF8, these initiatives, as well as others under development currently, will continue to assist the Secretariat, the agencies, and the countries to keep better track of implementation and performance across all dimensions of implementation. We value this, and we're committed to further that trend in GEF8. Let me now address recommendation number 4 on synergies and cooperation among agencies. Again, we appreciate the intent of this recommendation, which is aligned with the directions proposed in GEF8. We intend to address concentration among agencies as part of this. We would like to highlight that agencies use their own policies and procedure for the development and implementation of projects. We require, of course, for these policies to be consistent with the minimum standards approved by Council, And we provide guidelines to help agencies interpret and adhere to these standards and to other GEF policies. As such, we feel that additional GEF rules could add complexity to accessing GEF financing, could increase the risk of inconsistency between GEF and agency policies and procedures, and also contradicting simultaneous calls for streamlining in our OPS recommendations. Instead of introducing additional rules governing interactions between agencies and countries, we would like to propose exploring a number of changes and enhancements aimed at achieving similar objectives. These include enhancing the support provided to countries and to OFPs and helping them make fully informed decisions on the choice of GEF agencies. We expect that activities already under development for GEF 8 could help with that objective, such as the development of a country engagement strategy, the GEF 8 country support program strategy, and the development of a knowledge and learning strategy. We appreciate the recommendation that synergies should be cultivated between agencies. In addition to regular retreats and knowledge sharing events, the Secretariat submits that additional concrete opportunities for synergies will be facilitated through the GEF's integrated programs and the increased emphasis on this modality in GEF 8. Finally, the Secretariat strongly agrees that GEF agencies should only execute projects themselves on an exceptional basis. This is well established in GEF policy, and the Secretariat has confirmed this point in further information and guidance provided to agencies. While exceptions can be justified and authorized, they need to remain exceptional, and the Secretariat will continue to follow this approach. Turning now to recommendation number 5 on country engagement. We welcome this recommendation, as country engagement and ownership are pillars of GEF's business model for programming and delivery. As GEF's programming increasingly focuses on integrated approaches, robust and strategic country engagement is critical to delivery of results. At the same time, greater demands are being placed on operational focal points and country stakeholders. There's therefore a renewed sense of urgency in ensuring that GEF recipient countries are well informed, have the capacity and knowledge to lead strategic decisions on environmental priorities, and are fully empowered to engage with partners. Ensuring lasting and impactful global environment outcomes requires that kind of engagement. So the findings and recommendations of this report, the recent IO evaluation of the CSP program, and the ongoing experience that we have of strategic dialogue with countries are all very important and timely foundations for the development of a more systematic approach to country engagement. The Secretariat is in the process of developing such an overarching and strategic approach to country engagement, a direction that aligns fully, in our view, with IO's recommendation. This country engagement strategy will be presented and discussed at the 3rd replenishment meeting. In addition, the Secretariat will also pursue the Council-endorsed long-term vision on complementarity, coherence, and collaboration between the Green Climate Fund and the Global Environment Facility. Let me now turn to the 9th and final recommendation of OPS 7, which is on policy and system. We note the recommendation that monitoring of the implementation of GEF policies should continue and should have the objective of improving over time. The monitoring of safeguards, gender, and stakeholder engagement policies is governed by a separate GEF policy. This policy establishes the scope of the agency self-assessments and independent third-party reviews once per replenishment cycle, beginning in the final year of GEF 7. Lessons learned from this exercise in 2022 will inform whether the policy on monitoring agency compliance with GEF policy may require further update. In addition, the Secretariat has provided reports to Council at each meeting since the recent approval of these updated policies. We will continue to inform Council periodically of our findings and observations in monitoring policy adherence by agencies. Concerning integrated approach pilots, the IAPs, and impact programs, IPs, The GEF Secretariat welcomes IEO's recommendation on the need for reporting on the overall performance of each IAP and IP, as well as on the need to demonstrate the additionality of the integrated approach. As mentioned earlier by Gustavo, the Secretariat will consider establishing and codifying in guidelines a number of specific reporting requirements for the integrated programs in order to better track overall performance. We will also work on updated terms of reference for lead agencies implementing programs, with the view of securing that the additionality of integrated approaches is properly captured and reported. Concerning socioeconomic benefits, in GEF 8, the GEF will reinforce its capture of socioeconomic benefits in two ways: by disaggregating core indicator data on direct beneficiaries, and by enhancing attention to socioeconomic benefits in project review. Continuous focus will be brought to ensuring that projects and programs anchor the achievement of socioeconomic benefits in the design of their theories of change, and that progress in tracking during implementation are appropriate. Likewise, the GEF will continue to assess policy co-benefits across the range of indicators it uses. And finally, the Secretariat agrees that a partnership-wide knowledge and learning strategy and action plan should be developed and will be developed. We are currently working on it. Again, thank you very much to the IEO for its work and for its findings and recommendations. We welcome the recommendations of OPS 7 report. Thank you very much, and over to you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Françoise, and also the others from the Secretariat for laying out the management response to the evaluation of GEF 7. Now, while we have heard this presentation, I'd like to open the floor for the council members for questions and comments. I'll like to ask you, William, as the Secretary of the Council, to announce the list of speakers.
Thank you. Looks like Maria from the CSO network has requested the floor. Please go ahead.
Buenos días. Voy a hablar en español. Quiero ver si me escuchan bien los intérpretes para hablar bien despacio. Muchas gracias a la Oficina de Evaluación. Muchas gracias, Yuja. La verdad es que la evaluación no puede ser más apropiada y coherente con lo que hemos estado viviendo y realizando desde la sociedad civil global, y sobre todo, para ser específico, sobre las conclusiones que plantea Yuja en el informe, la conclusión 6, que nos habla de las complejidades que traen los programas de tamaño mediano, los medium size projects, y en donde hay que poner la mirada para, junto a la conclusión 7, buscar el escalonamiento de programas que pueden ser superadores en articulación inclusiva, que es un ámbito que la sociedad civil y a través de la red puede avanzar e innovar. Desde Uruguay vivimos un GEF 5 que fue un medium size, que a partir de la articulación integrada de distintos actores, tanto de sociedad civil como de gobiernos, de la academia, y la inclusión de un sector privado de pequeña y mediana escala, se ha podido lograr trabajar y juntos encontrar soluciones y dar una apertura a cómo los fondos GEF pueden potenciarse de una manera incremental. Esta adicionalidad la proponemos como un modo operativo para el GEF 8, para el nuevo reposicionamiento de fondos. Aquí también, en lo que Yuja dice, que ha habido un debilitamiento de parte de la red específicamente. Coincidimos plenamente que esto ha ido, como lo he mencionado muchas veces antes, o sea, felicitamos al programa de pequeñas donaciones que ha sido muy exitoso, pero la red tiene que reubicarse en otros modos de articulación, en otros modos de actividad, llevar los ejemplos que son lecciones aprendidas, y creo que hay muchísimo espacio para trabajar juntos, hay un espacio enorme para la articulación, estamos en nuestros países, estamos en el territorio, estamos en la región dispuestos a apoyar y a trabajar de esta manera. Muchísimas gracias a todos.
Muchas gracias, María. Ana, you have the floor.
Thank you, William. Thank you, Mr. Chair. We are pleased with the GEF attaining satisfactory implementation and execution ratings of at least 80% of the completed projects. We would like to highlight GEF's increasing efforts to be more dynamic and responsive in the coordination, monitoring, and evaluation of projects across the partnership for program success. These are indeed fundamental aspects that can enhance performance and increase success rates and sustainability of programs. With regard to innovation and risk, we are very much receptive to the idea of establishing a specific window for financing innovation with a higher risk tolerance, and agree that GEF should incentivize innovative projects to create a more favorable environment for innovation. However, we would like to seek further guidance on the levels of high-risk projects and the incentivization of innovative projects, such as the criteria, methodology, and available case studies. Even though GEF has recognized the value of investing in micro-level project performance, we would still like to emphasize that we continue to focus and prioritize on local participation and engagement of local communities in GEF projects before engaging in high-risk taking investments. We must continually strive to improve the quality and sustainability of low-risk taking projects. We also believe that both simple and bold innovative programs, along with strengthened engagement with the private and civil sector and indigenous peoples, will significantly help us achieve the 30 by 30 biodiversity targets in ASEAN countries by strengthening partnerships and ownerships, prioritizing biodiversity-rich territorial areas, and regional connectivity of protected areas. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Ana. Renato has the floor.
Thank you, William. Thank you, William. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you fine. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. On behalf of the constituents of Brazil, Colombia, and Ecuador, we'd like to commend the IEO for finalizing this report of assessment of GEF results and performance for the last 4 years. We would like to present some comments and questions regarding 3 main points. First one is under the conclusion number 1 of the document. We agree of the need for a more integrative approach across various sectors of finance in GEF. However, we also noted in this way, and this may be the case of GEF 8, that the number of IPs may be too ambitious and may create too many different thematic areas. The need to achieve maximum impact is recognized, but we think care must be taken, as the existence of many impact programs can result in fragmentation and not integration. In this sense, we urge GEF to take into account the complementarity, coherence with other existing funds within the framework of international agreements, in order to focus on those issues on which GEF can add value, and also to analyze the coherence with multilateral environment agreements and the priorities of the countries. Second, we would like to particularly support conclusion number 4 of the document on the importance of the STAR system to the GEF, especially its predictability of resources. We understand we need to preserve this rationale for the future, that is the idea of allocation of predictable resource to all developing countries, with no graduations among them, as these categorizations does not exist in multilateral environment conventions, based on transparent indicators. In this regard, we'd like to hear from Jua if IEO sees any contradictions between the rising number of IPs under the proposed GEF-8 scenario and the strengthening of STAR model. And third and finally, on paragraph 22 of the Secretariat's management response with regard to country engagement recommendations, we would like to seek more clarity on how the country engagement strategy will be developed into the existing country support program and how they will relate to each other. This is important. For us, it is important that the country support program must be strengthened as a corporate program under the country engagement strategy with a more robust and dedicated budget. And as an important tool to strengthen capabilities of recipient countries with focus in the role of the operational focal points and their capacity to make strategic decisions on the use of GEF resources according to national priorities. Thank you. Over to you.
Sorry, I got stuck there. Thank you, Renato. So Abigail from the US, please, you have the floor.
Thank you, William. Good morning or good afternoon or good evening to colleagues. First off, I'd like to thank the IEO for all of the work they put into their report and evaluations. It's critical work to inform the GEF-8 replenishment process. We value both the reassurance of GEF's relevance, capacity, and long-term impacts, as well as the recommendations for areas of growth and improvement. Regarding the GEF's management response to OPS 7, we appreciate GEF's commitment to streamlining the application process, which will allow countries, agencies, and the private sector to secure resources and implement projects more quickly, while still providing robust review of project design. I would note that lately in many of the international circles, there has been an increased attention to nature and biodiversity issues, both in the public sector and in the private sector space. And we, the United States, really do want GEF to be at the center of those conversations. And so we want to make sure that none of the internal procedures are a barrier to the GEF being able to engage and to spread its expertise among the many agencies who could benefit from its work. I also want to underscore that we appreciate the Secretariat's commitment to increasing GEF support to the LDCs and SIDS. Moving forward, we want to closely consider efforts to close the potential gaps between, moving on to the issues of agencies and fiduciary standards. Moving forward, we would like to closely consider efforts to close the potential gaps between having good policies on paper and implementing them effectively. Obviously, this is something we spent a lot of time on this morning. And we do think that this aspect of the GEF will, as we discussed this morning, continue to be something extremely important for the success of the overall enterprise. With respect to country ownership, we also strongly support efforts to enhance country ownership of projects and implementation, including through support for the operational focal points, so that they are in a position to access the full benefit of the resources the GEF can provide and the expertise of agencies, and also so that they can carry forward in their own context the policy coherence agenda, which I know is a priority for GEF-8. In closing, I just want to say we appreciate the GEF's efforts to incorporate knowledge management in the core of each of the proposed integrated programs for GEF-8, as we think this is a valuable recommendation from OPS 7. I'll stop there. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Abigail. Gabriela, you have the floor.
Thank you, William.
We would also like to again express our sincere gratitude to the entire IEO team for the tremendous efforts to conclude OPS 7 in time. The evaluation is, as others also have highlighted, of great value to the GEF as a learning institution, and we welcome very much all of its recommendations. It is our understanding that the majority of recommendations will be addressed in the context of the GEF 8 replenishment process, as also has been highlighted by others, and we welcome that the GEF Secretariat in its management response also refers to this in writing and has now also highlighted this orally. We have a procedural question. Since OPS 7 is a collection of 34 separate evaluations conducted since OPS 6, and the GEFSAC has issued management responses to all of these, how does the management response to the overall OPS 7 and especially its recommendations relate to the previous management responses? And how does the Council endorsement of the OPS 7 management response affect the Council decisions related to the separate evaluations? We're asking this because it's the first time we're actually doing it this way around because of the changes we have done in light of the changes related to the governance group. So we would just seek procedural clarification on this. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Gabriela. Marta, tiene la palabra.
Thank you, Chair. I will intervene in Spanish. So, agradecemos esta evaluación, que es de gran valor para nosotros. Coincidimos con la recomendación de la séptima evaluación sobre la necesidad de avanzar hacia una mayor involucración con los países receptores. Esto facilitaría una asignación más eficiente de los recursos sobre la base de una estrategia coherente que integre las diferentes políticas sectoriales frente a un enfoque fragmentado proyecto por proyecto. Por ello, creemos que es importante seguir avanzando en la programación integrada. Las lecciones aprendidas con los programas piloto del GEF 6 y los programas de impacto en el GEF 7 deben aprovecharse para optimizar la programación integrada planteada en el proceso de reposición para el GEF 8. Creemos que es crucial la involucración de las agencias líderes, su trabajo conjunto con los puntos focales nacionales y las agencias ejecutadoras, junto con el desarrollo de una estrategia clara de gestión del conocimiento. Así podremos aprovechar las lecciones aprendidas durante el proceso de ejecución de los proyectos. Podremos generalizar enfoques innovadores como las funciones basadas en la naturaleza y promocionar del aprendizaje regional sur-sur. Además, impulsar la innovación permitirá avanzar hacia un cambio transformador de la economía. Apoyamos la recomendación del informe señalando que el GEF debe considerar la posibilidad de establecer una ventanilla específica para financiar la innovación con una mayor tolerancia al riesgo. También quisiera subrayar que podemos conseguir una mayor repercusión de los proyectos si involucramos a más agentes y trabajamos en la identificación de los stakeholders relevantes. El GEF tiene un gran potencial para movilizar recursos adicionales, por lo que debemos potenciar la estrategia de participación del sector privado y el Non-Grant Instrument, así como la posibilidad de asociación con otras instituciones financieras, otros fondos ambientales, climáticos y bancos multilaterales de desarrollo. Finalmente, quisiera destacar que apreciamos que la Secretaría haya tenido en cuenta las consideraciones que fueron aportadas durante la pasada segunda reunión de la reposición del GEF 8 a finales de septiembre del 2021. Muchas temáticas nos resultan familiares: mayor recuperación de los países, programación integrada, cooperación con otras instituciones, etc. Y agradecemos a la Secretaría que las haya integrado en el documento del Management Response. Muchas gracias.
Muchas gracias, Marta. Gisela, who is returning to the chair for Italy. You have the floor.
Thank you, William, and thank you for your welcome. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all colleagues. At first, I would like to praise the Independent Evaluation Office for the effort to put together this valuable and accurate document, as well as I would like to thank the management for the comprehensive response. Being a new appointed council member, I have benefited a lot from this evaluation since it gave me the opportunity to rapidly deep into the GEF and try to understand what is working well, what is acceptable but may be improved, and what really needs to be improved. The GEF has the benefit to be the sole financing mechanism of 5 global convention and multilateral environmental agreements, able to mobilize environmental finance in pursuit of global environmental benefits, natural-based solution, and transformation change. This offers an incredible competitive advantage in enabling programmatic approaches across complex systems. We think that the GEF has an extraordinary added value compared to other funds and institutions, but this needs to be fully exploited. We welcome the substantial progress towards the challenges and gaps identified in OPS 7. And in particular, we appreciate the capacity of GEF to improve its strategic position, as well as designing for transformation across all focal areas in line with comparative advantage and experience. However, we note that still many challenges remain to be addressed. In this regard, we welcome the OPS 7 findings and recommendation, as well as the positive attitude of GEF management and strong commitment to move forward in their implementation. Let me stress just a few of them that we believe to be critical. First, on synergies and cooperation among agencies. We note the recommendation stating that the GEF should establish clear ground rules for GEF agency interactions with respect to project development and implementation, and in terms of engaging with OFPs and executing agencies. We also note the response of management in this regard. We tend to agree with management that creating rules would add complexity to an already very complex scenario panorama. However, we also agree that efforts should be made to minimize competition and increase collaboration among agencies, favoring the selection of agencies that have demonstrated a clear comparative advantage and avoiding a concentration of portfolio in few agencies. Achieving sustainable and ambitious results cannot be done in isolation, and synergies need to be cultivated between agencies. In this regard, management propose alternative action. I would like to ask if management could elaborate further on this proposal, and would it possible to have a document to be discussed at the next council meeting with all the actions that management intend to implement to address this issue? A key feature of the GEF is the opportunity of collaboration among different types of agencies with a shared mission, and we believe that GEF should really enhance its efforts to making the best use of its agencies in supporting countries to realize the environmental ambitions and commitment. The second point that I would like to raise is on priority country groups and country engagement. First of all, let me stress the importance that the GEF increases its support to LDCs and SIDs to have greater impact in these priority countries. We welcome the increased GEF support in terms of financial commitment between GEF 5 and GEF 7, and this has been always a point of concerns for us. LDCs and CIDs have much more difficult to grow and protect the environment due to their limited capacity, and we believe that GEF has an important role to play. To ensure that all GEF receiving countries have the ability and knowledge to lead the strategic decision and environmental priorities, a deeper engagement and a major focus of those countries that have less capacity are really needed. We welcome the decision of the Secretariat to develop a renewed strategic and holistic approach to country engagement that will build on country support program. We urge the Secretariat to work with agencies to focus on LDCs and SIDs to address capacity building and achieve a system change. And the last point is on private sector mobilization. The OPS 7 report highlighted the potential positive impact on private sector, but it also recommends facilitating the access for these actors to the GEF resources and to reduce complexity in order to leverage available resources and funds for environment. In this regard, we fully believe that GEF should focus on its financial catalytic role and strengthen its partnership with private sector and civil society. Private sector can play a key role to address transformation and systemic change into sustainable and greener economies. Just to conclude, we generally welcome all the recommendations of the Independent Evaluation Office. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Gisela. Madam Co-Chair, since we have 18 speakers, maybe you want to get some replies now, and we have 3 batches of 6, if you think that's correct. I'll give you the floor.
Thank you very much for the questions and comments, and thank you, William. I would like now to ask Juha first to respond to the question related to IO. Juha, please.
Okay, thank you very much. And as always, so I'm very pleased with how the discussion is going, and I thank you all for the great support that we are getting. Let me just start by commenting on the new system here, and there were some comments from the CEO and also from some council members on it. I think that this is the first time we are doing it exactly like this, and so there may be some things to iron out. But I think that this sounds really good. I truly appreciate the detailed and operational management response as it is here now. It is truly the management prerogative to propose how to address each of the issues that the evaluation has pointed out and has identified, and that is what the management response is doing. I would like to point out, though, that this will in the future require more time in presenting evaluations earlier, like has been pointed out by Carlos Manuel. In this particular case, of course, the OPS 7 report, full report, was available to the second replenishment meeting in September, and it hasn't changed after that. Annexes have been added and it has been edited, but nothing really has changed. So it was available, but that's there. The other thing is that not all of the recommendations, of course, are at this level are not in the only address to the GEF Secretariat, and they are beyond the implementation or decision-making power of the GEF Secretariat, because they may concern other parts of the GEF partnership as well. But that is the nature of this comprehensive evaluation and so forth. Gabriela asked about the process, actually, that how does this management response relate to the individual management responses of the 34 evaluations, or almost 30 that have been so far already dealt with in the council. There is no contradiction between the management responses, because OPS 7 builds upon, it doesn't contradict any of the 34 evaluation findings. What there may be is that, and what there is that some of the 34 have gone more into detail, and there are some specifics in them that will be followed up separately, whereas OPS 7 has tried to lift the recommendations to a higher level from a set of evaluations. So it's different levels. So if there is anything, there is mutual reinforcement between them, but there are no identical and certainly no contradictory recommendations. So everything can be tracked as such. Then I think the only real direct question to us was from Renato on the potential contradiction between the expansion of the number of integrated programs versus a STAR. And I don't feel that I am competent to answer that in light of evaluative evidence. What we have evaluated is both the integrated programs and the focal areas and STAR allocations, and obviously both aspects have been performing rather well. It's a matter of balance on how much resources one wants to allocate to each one of these modalities, and I think that balance is a policy choice that primarily the council would have to take. The rest of it is in line with the what I said earlier, that it is the prerogative of the management to decide on how to operationalize the recommendations that we have made. So I would say that the rest of the questions are really mostly directly to the management, who has given us a very thoughtful management response.
Thank you very much, Juha. Then I will ask the Secretariat to respond to some of the questions. May I invite first Gustavo, then Francois. Gustavo, please.
Well, thank you very much. Go ahead, Carlos.
Yes, yeah. Can you excuse me just for a second?
Sorry.
So two reactions, very quick reactions from my side before the Gustavo and Francois' reaction. One is that we have been heavily using IO recommendations in the GEF 8 replenishment process. As you can probably have seen, we were very grateful by the fact that we were able to access or have a copy of the draft OPS 7 before the second replenishment meeting. That was extremely helpful, and we've been working since then in the task towards the third replenishment meeting. And the other point that I want to highlight is the commitment that I did assume with Tom Bowie in the last replenishment meeting, that we will put an annex on all of the IO recommendation in the for the third replenishment documents. So we will be working on that. So over to you, Gustavo.
Thank you, Carlos Manuel. I didn't see many actually questions in regards to the management responses. I think what we heard here are reflections of what we have in one form or another included in the management responses, dealing with stakeholder engagements, with private sector engagement as well, which of course is important to operationalize in the context of what we are learning more through the private sector engagement strategy. Also making use of the conclusions that are included in the IO OPS evaluation in terms of integrated programs being better able to capture stakeholder engagement, multi-stakeholder platforms, private sector engagement, and so forth. And in that sense, on the question of whether integrated programs fragment or not, I would like just to point to OPS 7 that has concluded clearly that this approach to programming actually represents an advancement in GEF 7's mandate on tackling global environmental challenges. And the issues that are covered by the IPs are in the very nature systemic, and therefore they do not lead to fragmentation of GEF resources. To the contrary, the approach proposes to foster more efficient use of focal area resources in a manner that delivers multiple environmental benefits and also systems transformation. And what the OPS 7 has recommended are key operational issues that we believe and we agree with the IEO will strengthen the overall approach and make it even more powerful than what we've observed so far. The question of Gabriela, I think it was well addressed by Juha already. And of course, we've been following the individual studies ever since they began being brought to the council, and have, to the extent possible, brought them into the multiple drafts of the replenishment. I don't want to get too much into the replenishment because perhaps this is not the forum, but there were many comments that reflect on the process that's being discussed by the participants in the replenishment session. I think the comment by Spain on more engagement with the countries, I think it's well reflected in the management responses, as well as those very important reflections made by Italy, which I think is very important, including how we can more systemically and more purposely think about collaboration across different groups. Focus on SIDS and LDCs is very well reflected also in the management response that have been provided at different recommendations, as well as private sector mobilization and trying to bring different actors to the table. Also on the question of bringing that the US has brought up, bringing nature and biodiversity at the center of the GEF, I think that's well reflected also in the thinking that's going on into the GEF 8 ideas. So I'll leave it here. Thanks, Carlos Manuel.
Thanks, Gustavo. Francois?
Thanks very much, Chair. Now, speaking to some of the points I have covered in the management response, first, let me note with thanks the support and the emphasis brought by Council members on a number of very important topics. The importance of country ownership and empowerment, and the high relevance of support to OFPs that has been mentioned by Brazil and Philippines. The importance of knowledge and learning and how it can be sourced and disseminated to make full use of learnings in integrated programs, and also for reaching out to country counterparts, which the USA and Spain have insisted on. The importance of implementation in assessing compliance with policy raised by the USA representative, which we fully agree with and are lined up precisely to assess and capture through the process of independent reviews of the various self-assessments produced by agencies. So all these points are certainly extremely congruent with both the recommendations of IEO, our response, and our commitments. Finally, let me address one question raised by Renato from Brazil concerning the link between the proposed country engagement strategy and the country support program. The country engagement strategy, as you all know, is yet to be finalized and proposed for discussion in the context of replenishment. So the question still comes early, but let me at least provide reassurance that it is in no way seen as a substitute for the country support program. The need for the country support program, which is targeting really the learning, knowledge, and operational needs of country counterparts taken in a very broad sense, is still there, and the proposed country support program strategy as presented in GEF 8 will remain as part of the GEF 8 proposal. What is currently proposed is to have an overarching strategic thinking on country engagement that goes above and beyond the country support program in looking at all the dimensions where the GEF partnership engages countries, and that includes all other forms of engagement through operations and through strategic dialogue upstream. So think about it as an umbrella strategy with the country support program being a full part whose strategy is currently already available. So thanks very much for the question.
Thanks, Francois. Sorry, but I think that Sonja has a final comment here.
Thank you, Carlos Manuel. I just wanted to add to Juha's response on Gabriella's very excellent question on the link between the underlying reports, their recommendations, and our management responses, and then the OPS7 report, their recommendations, and our management response. So as Juha said, there's no contradiction in any of the text, either in the recommendations of OPS7 or in our management response. So the OPS7 recommendations bring together many of the recommendations of the underlying evaluations, and also goes into some newer areas and brings them all together into a series of these 9 high-level strategic recommendations. So in our management response, as you would have seen, we're responding specifically to what OPS7 recommendations say, but where the recommendation is relevant to the recommendation of an underlying evaluation to which we've already provided a response, we also make that link. We've adopted the same position that we've taken in those underlying evaluations, and we cross-reference the material where necessary. Now, as you all know, the IEO holds us to very strict standards in terms of our adoption and progress against these recommendations. So all of the recommendations of the underlying evaluations will be tracked every year through the management action record, as is always done. So yes, we are in new territory, well recognized, and I think we're all learning by doing as we proceed, but we have forecasted some of this, and we're trying to find the best procedural ways to go forward. And as we bring these different responses and management action records, et cetera, to council, by all means, Gabriella and others, please give us the feedback and let us know how we and the IU, how collectively we can improve and do better in this new regime. Thank you.
Thank you very much to Juha and also to the Secretariat for the comments to the questions of the council members. Now, before we continue, we have reached actually the planned end time of the meeting, but we still have 12 council members that would like to have an intervention on this agenda item. So may I suggest that we take all the 12 on the list in one go, and then have any comments from Juha and the Secretariat afterwards. I know this is late for some council members, and I will just ask the council if it is okay to go over time. If you have any comments to that, please put your name in the chat. I see none, and I thank you very much. And I will now give the floor to William to announce the list of speakers. And I would like to ask the council members to be concise in their comments. William, please.
Thank you very much. Yoshiko has the floor.
Thank you for giving me the floor. Japan welcomes the final report of OPS7 with more explicit IEO recommendations and appreciates also receiving the management response on time. We support many of your conclusions. We have 2 points to make on this item. Many have already been addressed. Strongly support references made to too many IPs by Brazil and greater support to be given to LDCs and SID cited by many others. But now on remaining points, there's a recommendation to the GEF to provide guidance and support to OIPs for the realization of cross-government, multi-ministry leadership groups on GEF projects. We were wondering how you were going to do this, and I imagine now from your presentation that this is primarily through the country engagement strategy. And so we'd like to please elaborate what process you're going to take to develop the strategy, taking into account the instrument's emphasis on country ownership and a national policy-driven approach to ensure buy-ins. We look forward to seeing this strategy at the next third replenishment meeting, as mentioned by the Secretariat. And in it, we'd like you to address issues such as structure, roles and responsibilities throughout the project lifecycle and perceived timelines and means of implementation, how you're going to be scaling this effort, and whether you're widening this to agencies to more specialized topic-focused players to increase relevance and ensure involvement of sector-relevant stakeholders. And finally, we see the repeated recommendations to take risks to pursue innovative solutions. But again, as contributors, we'd like to have to more concretely understand the definition of risk here and how, under what criteria measure this is being assessed to allow us to define an acceptable level of risk as requested in the recommendation. For example, do we also mean our ability to address conflicts in sensitive situations? We're mindful that the MEAs are silent on the issue of peace and security, for example, and this, when or if it's addressed, is a very, very controversial item at the COPs of the conventions and can impact reporting and evaluations. We're also mindful that we have the non-grants instruments for risk-taking purposes, so we need to delineate the differences here, as grants are typically sourced by ODA. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Annette, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. And also, Germany appreciates the final OPS 7 report and its recommendations, as well as the management response. We very much welcome the management response, especially on the chapter of, or the point on synergies among agencies. For example, the joint country strategy approach. I think simplifying administrative processes is a great way forward. And for me, that's within the overall topic of access to finance that was duly discussed at the last COP26. In your management responses, you noted several issues that we are welcome. And for me, that's particularly access to finance for LDCs and SIDS and also the private sector. Simplifying these procedures is also a way of possibly the next step, alignment across climate funds. So, for example, when you discuss a joint country strategy, why not go beyond and discuss that together with all the other climate funds? Regarding the institutional policies and systems chapter, Germany notes with concern that there's a gap in the submission of project reports for low-performing projects. We noted that in the last discussions already. Germany urges the GEF Secretariat to implement appropriate measures to follow up on the timely submission of documents. Regarding the non-grant instrument, the OPS 7 suggests to establish a private capital market investment framework and a long-term vision for the NGI. Given the importance of the NGI for leveraging private climate finance, we would like to understand how this should be envisioned and how the Secretariat intends to integrate this into GEF 8. Also on the topic of private sector, we would very much welcome disaggregated data regarding private sector engagement in order to analyze barriers for leveraging private sector and also the limits for leveraging private sector. This could then also inform a more systematic approach to innovation, piloting and scaling up. In this regard, and yes, I read your very, very informative note, number 7 on the private sector. Regarding the findings of OPS 7 that greater and transformative impact can be generated through risk-taking, we very much urge the Secretariat to consider how more risk-taking is possible. And yes, it's obviously a fine balance, as my predecessor from Japan noted, and needs to be tackled with great care. But for example, through medium-sized project, it would be possible to test new and innovative approaches. We would also ask to consider especially recommendations in this regard as part of GEF 8, including a specific window for financing innovation with high risks. Japan yesterday also made a suggestion on looking into risks definition and synthesizing these findings and see how these could be applied to the private sector, adapt and possibly then increase the level of acceptable risk. The last point is on policies and safeguards. Thanks very much for the management response on that. We're very much looking forward to an increasing evidence of effectiveness of the new policies on safeguards, and especially gender and stakeholder engagement. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Liesl has the floor.
Hi, I hope my connection's not too bad. If it breaks up, I'll send our comments in writing. Hope you can hear me.
We can hear you okay.
Okay, thank you. On behalf of our constituency, we'd very much like to thank IEO for OPS 7 report. It's positive to see that many of the recommendations from OPS 7 are addressed in the programming directions for GEF 8. This shows the importance of the IEO's work for the further development of the GEF and reaffirms once again that the GEF is a learning institution. We thank the Secretariat for its management response, and our constituency can endorse those. We note that the IEO's conclusions regarding the GEF's integrated programming. We welcome the fact that GEF 7 has shown some improvements compared to GEF 6. And even though we recognize that, and many council members have raised this, that evidence is not yet well recorded, we in our constituency firmly believe that GEF should increase its integrated focus. And by this, of course, we mean that we're happy to support the increased number of integrated programs in GEF 8. Though we do very strongly recommend that the recommendations from the IEO should nevertheless be taken into account when designing the new GEF 8 integrated programs. We thank the GEF for having taken steps in GEF 7 to increase the efficiency of the partnership and speed up the approval process of projects and programs. Nevertheless, as noticed in OPS 7, we believe there's still potential for improving the efficiency and streamlining some processes for the GEF. This would allow for quicker delivery of results on the ground and for better involvement of local communities and the private sector. We would be interested in analyzing whether more streamlined and efficient processes would lead to less administrative costs. In that regard, we appreciate the Secretariat's response to revisit its policies, guidelines, procedures, and operations. On a final note, we take note of the IEO's appreciation of GEF's effort to improve results reporting, and would also like to thank the GEF for the work done in GEF 7. We hope that recommendations in OPS 7 around further improving results reporting, especially for the integrated programs and on co-benefits, such as resilience and adaptation, will be duly considered in GEF 8. Results reporting combined with strong knowledge management are important aspects for the GEF partnership. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lisa. Alain, vous avez la parole.
Cette fois-ci, c'est Stéphanie.
You're doing this on purpose.
Bonjour à tous. Yes, exactly. Sorry for that. Well, bonjour à tous. Je vais m'exprimer en français. D'abord, comme mentionné par Carlos Manuel, la publication est arrivée un peu tard en amont du Conseil et nous voudrions, même si nous comprenons les circonstances particulières actuelles, nous voudrions encourager le secrétariat à prendre en compte le temps de revue nécessaire de notre côté pour la préparation des conseils. Nous remercions le bureau indépendant de l'évaluation pour ce document de grande qualité qui enrichit les discussions dans le cadre du processus de reconstitution FEM 8 et qui montre l'engagement de toute l'équipe du bureau indépendant de l'évaluation pour cette rédaction, pour ce document. Nous remercions également le secrétariat pour sa réponse. Et nous souhaitons relever en particulier 4 recommandations, même si toutes nous paraissent pertinentes. 4 retiennent notre attention au regard de nos priorités pour la reconstitution. D'abord, concernant la concentration, nous encourageons le secrétariat à considérer les modalités d'action précises pour mettre en œuvre la recommandation sur la concurrence entre les agences afin que soient valorisés davantage leurs avantages comparatifs et leurs lieux d'opération. Ensuite, nous soutenons les recommandations relatives à l'accessibilité du fonds et à l'accroissement du soutien du FEM aux PMA et aux SIDS, dont les ressources actuellement allouées sont trop faibles pour permettre une transformation significative. Et de ce point de vue, nous remercions le secrétariat pour leur travail déjà engagé en ce sens. Troisièmement, nous appuyons la recommandation sur la nécessaire additionnalité de l'approche intégrée des IPs et sa complémentarité avec les projets existants, ainsi que la clarification des rôles entre les agences impliquées. Et enfin, nous soutenons une plus grande implication du secteur privé, y compris des PME, dans les projets et les programmes du FEM. Merci.
Merci, Stephanie. Karen, you have the floor.
Sorry, didn't I hear you?
Just go ahead, Karen. Yes, you're ready. Please go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Very briefly, thank you to the IEO team for the OPS 7 report and the interesting presentation today, both of the report but also of the management response. Sweden welcomes the management response to the evaluation and the information on how to address the recommendations of it. To mention a few areas, I mean, we think that, as has been said by others, all the recommendations are very valid, obviously, but to mention a few areas, we are very interested in following the proposed actions on country engagement and ownership, including the process of developing a renewed approach to this, and also the link to action regarding increased support to LDCs and SIDS. We are also following with great interest the development of international guidance on conflict-sensitive programming, and we are looking forward to further discussions in the GEF 8 process on all these aspects and how that will be incorporated into that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Karen Hongxia, you have the floor.
Thank you. So thank you. We'd like to commend the IO's efforts on making a comprehensive GEF 7 evaluation and welcome its valuable findings and conclusions. We also thank the Secretariat and the management response. Drawing on these findings and conclusions, I'd like to highlight 4 points for the future operation of the GEF. Point number 1, as a financing mechanism of several important international conventions, GEF should continue to provide financial resources to all recipient countries, especially vulnerable countries. Second, GEF needs to take into account the effectiveness of integrated programs, the willingness and capacity of developing countries, and adopt a prudent step-by-step approach in expanding the integrated programs. Point number 3, we support to strengthen country ownership and provide enhanced support to national operational focal points. Point number 4, we hope that the GEF could simplify approval procedures and facilitate quick access to financial resources. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Laverne, you have the floor.
Thank you. And in the event that there are any communication connection issues, I will also be presenting our intervention in writing at the end of council. I would like to thank the IEO for their report, as well as the response that was given by the GEF Secretariat. The Caribbean constituency welcomes the GEF's commitment to be a leader in the green recovery as we endeavor to capitalize on opportunities that have presented themselves during the challenges of the pandemic. We take from conclusion 4 in the IE report something very different from opposed to Brazil. There was a statement that indicated that there was no a questionable merit in terms of the designated staff portions in line with the conventions, and that remains unclear in regards to the fact that the global environmental challenges are multifaceted. That was a bit of a concern for us. The STAR modalities of merit and by no means impedes or undermines the efforts to address multifaceted issues as this is merely a matter of the strategic allocation of resources by the countries based on national assessment and remains in keeping with the mandate of the GEF to provide financing in line with the MEAs. This opportunity is used to again emphasize a concern that has emerged earlier in the programming process leading into GEF 8, that the star resources should not be sacrificed on the altar of advancing the programming of integrated programs. The IPs as designed have a minimum input of resources of 4 million, which means most members in the Caribbean constituency would have been required to input all or the majority of their STAR allocation. In addition, the design of the IPs were not always in congruence with the focus or circumstances on ground for members. An example is the Sustainable Forest IP, where the Amazon Sustainable Landscape Project is being implemented, which had a specific focus on a type of biome for forestry. 2 of our members, Suriname and Guyana, are part of the initiative, but Jamaica, that had an interest with their forest landscape, was excluded due to the fact that they had a different biome in their forestry. The constituency is continuing to discuss with its members in regards to how the operationalization of the IP has worked in their context. The Caribbean constituency welcomes the proposed inclusion of the Blue and Green Islands and Clean and Healthy Oceans IP on the GEF 8. However, it is still unclear how these and the other IPs will be operationalized, and the increased number of these types of initiatives are a point of concern. The Caribbean constituency uses this opportunity to reiterate that we would not want the operationalization of any IPs, SIDS focused or not, to exclude us from participation. Most importantly, the IP should not hinder members from utilizing our STAR resources to assist in the advancement of our country's priorities through our project modalities as we strive to achieve global environmental benefits. In regards to the Small Grants Program, we agree that it will play an important role in the post-COVID-19 recovery as it provides resources at the grassroots level, which results in considerable environmental and sustainable development gains. To this end, the members are paying close attention to all recommendations when the role and the structure of the SGP on the GEF 8 and successive programming cycles are discussed. Most notable being the consideration of the GEF to draw on the expertise of its wider agency network to deliver projects under the program, as opposed to having UNDP as the sole administrator. The Caribbean constituency hope that any change or changes will not adversely affect the operations of the SGP in our respective countries. This opportunity is used to emphasize that based on the significant contribution of the SGP in the advancement of the environmental management and sustainable development agenda of the Caribbean states, we will want to be an active participant in the dialogue and formulation process of the operationalization of the mechanism or mechanisms envisioned in this regard. Improvement in GEF administrative processes and private sector engagement are interconnected. The Caribbean constituency supports efforts to streamline processes to effectively roll out support for the post-pandemic recovery. However, attention needs to be given to the concerns that have been raised regarding the ability of the private sector to access GEF financing to the NGI without the knowledge or endorsement of the operational focal point. The continuation of this procedure will be counterproductive to ensuring a cohesive recovery process, as actions undertaken by the private sector must support the national agenda. In addition, attention will need to be given to the limited capacities of the private sector within our region and SIDS in general, which pre-pandemic had been heavily dependent upon the government for support and has only increased further since the onset of COVID-19. In some instances, the implementation of COVID-19 protocols and narrowing fiscal space has caused segments of our MSMEs to disappear, possibly for good, as our governments were unable to provide the needed financial support. We recommend to the GEF for the private sector engagement, we commend the GEF for the private sector engagement strategy, which has been approved, but encourage the development of a strategy or more thorough articulation within the private sector engagement strategy, guided by an assessment of the characteristics of the private sector in the SIDS. Last but not least, the Caribbean constituency has a long record of very proactive OFPs and PFPs that value the need for ongoing engagement with stakeholders across all spectrums of the society. We indeed welcome the proposal for a cohesive and comprehensive country engagement strategy, which will be formulated with the input of the OFPs. However, the Caribbean constituency uses this opportunity to remind the GEF that although there are similarities in our island nations, there are striking differences as well. Therefore, the proposed engagement strategy cannot be devised within flexible parameters that make it difficult for countries to engage with the GEF, with agencies, stakeholders, and financing mechanisms in a manner which will derive the benefits envisioned by the GEF and our respective governments. Emphasis has been placed in the management response on the long-term vision on complementarity, coherence, and collaboration between the GEF and GCF, which the implementation will be buttressed on the OFPs and NDAs, which will form part of the country engagement strategy. As mentioned in the 61st Council session, there are notable differences regarding both mechanisms, how they engage with their vital stakeholders, and the resultant impact this has on collaboration and stakeholder engagement. As the GEF 8 country engagement strategy will be presented at the GEF 8 third replenishment meeting and the implementation arrangements at the 62nd Council meeting, the constituency requests that time be allowed after the third replenishment meeting for comments to be submitted from its members and those of other recipient countries. In addition, we also request that the implementation arrangements be made available via intersessional circulation prior to the 62nd Council session to allow Council members to gain insight from their respective constituencies. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Pavic, you have the floor.
Thank you, William. East Asia would like to thank IEO, and we welcome the recommendation in the evaluation reports. Moreover, we have an additional suggestion regarding the small grant program that our constituency views that the OFP should have more involvement in the project selection and implementation. We all, therefore, would like to propose that the OFP representative should be included in the project steering committee in order to follow up and monitoring the SGP progress. Furthermore, we should be involved in establishing project strategic framework, selecting the local community or organization to be undertake the project, as well as providing recommendation on project implementation to ensure that project activities are in line with the national and local priority related to national resources and environment. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Gerard, you have the floor.
Thank you, William. I wish to thank the IEO, and we welcome also this comprehensive evaluation report for its detailed view of GEF progress on the implementation and achievement of GEF 2020 strategy. We note with appreciation management response to these recommendations and the commitment to give due consideration thereto, as well as the support to SIDS and LDF. However, we would like to make some observations on behalf of the Eastern African constituency. On the aspect of project post-completion sustainability, a comparison by region highlights the fact that projects in Africa have an overall lower likelihood of sustainability as opposed to projects in other regions. Further, sustainability ratings in Africa show nominal but not statistically significant improvement across replenishment periods. To this effect, our concern is with regard to the factors that are adversely impacting on the quality of execution and sustainability in Africa at large. We would like to know what corrective actions are under consideration by GEF in order to remediate same. With respect to GEF support to scaling up impacts, we subscribe to the notion that there should be greater operational guidance across GEF portfolio for scaling up impacts. It would have been useful for the evaluation to attribute great emphasis to this issue and come up with relevant recommendations, as scaling up impacts is a very important dimension for us developing countries, LDCs, and SIDS. As it stands currently, we find the recommendation to be quite vague in terms of their practical translation in actionable items. And going forward, we would like to see this point further expounded. Finally, coming to the SGP, Small Grant Program, our concern has to do with whether the current governance structure is still adequate to deliver the SGP mandate, and if there are recommendations as to the further improvement. The report makes mention of limited budget constraints impacting on transformative development contributions. It would be useful to understand how this issue is planned to be addressed at the level of GEF. Thank you. Back to you, Rio.
Thank you very much, Gerard. Richard, from down under on the other side of the planet, you have the floor.
Thank you, William. First of all, thank you to the IEO for the report, and acknowledge and appreciate the OPS7 report and support the management response. To repeat what's been said by others, support the further work on the drivers of limited participation of LDCs and SIDS in the impact programs. Also note and acknowledge the incorporation of some of the management responses into the GEF8 replenishment process, including the private sector activities into integrated programs, as well as the monitoring of safeguards, gender and stakeholder engagement policies, which we would consider all to be very important. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ben, you have the floor.
Thanks very much, William. Just to be very brief, just firstly, welcome to Juha, and also to thank yourself and the work of the IEO on this report, which is particularly valuable in the light of COVID. We know the huge importance of this document for the GEF8 replenishment discussions and bring together important data and evidence together in one place. Thanks also to the GEFSEC for the management response, noting that OPS7 is an umbrella report of all those evaluations. And I welcome the GEFSEC response and noting that many of the issues will be taken forward as part of those and have been taken forward as part of those GEF8 discussions. It's important, obviously, that the GEF Secretariat takes seriously the recommendations, and many thanks to Carlos Manuel for reminding us that the GEF Secretariat will include an annex in response to the OPS7 as part of the next meeting. I think we just need to be clear as a council what we're doing in this agenda item and this decision. I think it's a little bit similar to what Swiss was saying as well, and maybe something which might be added to the end of the decision we've got. We might just want to add, noting that many recommendations have been and will be taken forward as part of the GEF8 replenishment deliberations. I won't go into detail of all the different aspects, obviously, of the OPS report, which we agree with and have comments on. I'll put that in writing if that is helpful. But just finally, just to say on Juha's teaser, it'd be helpful if you could just maybe remind us or clarify the timing of your future work program when we'll see that. Many thanks.
Thank you very much. Final speaker, Brenda, you have the floor.
Thank you, William. I will speak in Spanish. Muchas gracias y tomamos nota del informe y estamos de acuerdo con las recomendaciones hechas en el mismo. Después de la crisis del COVID-19 se ha reafirmado la importancia de buscar soluciones basadas en la naturaleza, especialmente en los países que han sido los más afectados por las condiciones sanitarias. Por lo tanto, consideramos importante tomar las lecciones aprendidas, actualizar, mejorar el funcionamiento del GEF y optimizar los procesos administrativos. Para nuestra circunscripción, el programa de pequeñas donaciones ha sido una de las mejores prácticas territoriales y ambientales que se han desarrollado, por lo que buscaremos impulsarlo en una octava fase. Hacemos eco de lo mencionado por Brasil, China y otros países que reiteran la importancia de fortalecer a los puntos focales operativos para hacer un uso estratégico de los recursos GEF de acuerdo con sus prioridades nacionales. Y asimismo invitamos al GEF a asegurar una buena operacionalización de los programas integrados y asegurar que su funcionamiento no lleve a una fragmentación. Finalmente, asegurar la previsibilidad de los recursos a todos los países y fortalecer el modelo STAR es algo que como región consideramos fundamental. Muchas gracias.
Well, thank you, Brenda. It seems that towards the end we lost the interpretation. So maybe you just want to send that in writing, and we'll circulate it to everybody, so everybody has it. So thank you very much. That's the last speaker. Back to you, co-chair, and bear in mind, I suppose it's because of the hour, the interpretation has now ended. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you all for your comments and questions. And I invite now Juha to comment on what we have heard. Juha, please.
Thanks very much. I don't have very much to say, but I saw one. There was Tom from Canada had a question in the chat about what is unhealthy competition between the agencies, and I realized that this is a term that has been a little bit confusing in the OPS 7 report, and because it actually probably refers to something that is anti-competitive, and it mostly refers to situations where you have a situation in which we have observed in some especially small countries where one agency mostly has captured the GEF program for a long period of time. So it also has to do with the concentration of agency. So I think we will try to clarify that before we print the report actually finally. I believe that this will also be helped, the situation will be helped with further strengthening the OFP's position and capacity, and with maybe with a stronger country engagement later on. I think Gerard had a direct question about the sustainability factors in Africa, and this is an issue that has been a perennial issue, and not only for the GEF, for many agencies, and they usually have to do with issues with low institutional and financial capacity that has to be taken into account in project design and implementation. And we also, our evaluation strategic country cluster evaluations emphasize the fact that it's important in these situations also to link the environmental programs to livelihood issues and socioeconomic benefits. He also, Gerard, asked about the scaling up recommendations more, but I'd like to also recall the fact that we had a specific evaluation on the scaling up, which had its more detailed recommendations, and we can share those further later. And Ben, about our work program, I think we can start sharing it quite soon. We are working on it, and perhaps the June Council meeting would be an opportune moment of sharing it more officially. What we have still 3 evaluations that are currently ongoing that will be coming to the June Council meeting, but those are the ones on sustainable forest management, enabling activities, and resilience. But then we are, after that, it's kind of an open slate. So for the new round, so we'd be very happy to get some comments on them. Thank you. That's all from my side.
Thank you very much, Juha. Then I will turn over to the Secretariat to respond to the comments that's been given by the council members. Should we start with you, Carlos Manuel?
Yeah, I don't have any specific reaction to the comments. Let me see if Gustavo and Francois do have.
Sure. Let me react very quickly because I think there were a number of common themes that were raised, which I think it's very, very pertinent. Number one, the question of bringing more resources to LDCs and SEDS. I think this has been an agreement that we all are working collectively to, both through the STAR, looking at the different formulas to enhance allocations. So that would be a very important step forward. Secondly, the number of IPs and the focus of the IPs, and I think this was brought up by the SIDS representative as well from the Caribbean. It's important that we have the ability, as the IO has recommended as well, to bring SIDS and LDCs into the mix and open up almost universal access to the opportunity to participate in integrated programs and be able to deliver more results with the GEF financing. In order to have that, we cannot be too constrained in the thematic areas of the IPs because they are different. They have different geographies, they have different emphasis, they have different places where the context will determine the proper composition of countries. So if we restrict too much the IP space, then we will not achieve this objective that I think has been expressed here many times. The question of innovation versus risk, I think this is, we wholeheartedly embrace the recommendation by the IEO, but this has to be a common exercise between the Secretariat, staff, the Council, because we need to arrive at a common space in which we all agree, what's the risk tolerance of the partnership at large in order to move forward. And this does not only remit to the question between innovation and risk, but also, as Japan has raised, questions of conflict, affected situations, peace, security, etc. So this is what should all be part of the exercise. In the question on country engagement, we're trying to bring to the country engagement strategy the different types of engagements that we have been working with. In countries, we have, for example, done a lot of upstream country engagements when we start a replenishment process to engage with the countries on priorities, on how they would like to use their resources. But then we have the regular CSP products that you already came to know on ECWs, on national dialogues, on other types of engagement that complement a lot of what we do on programming. But more and more, this engagement needs to also encompass stakeholder engagement, private sector reach. And so the idea is to really expand what we do and support not only the OFPs that need enhancement, but also have a much broader engagement with the countries that bring different sectors, different ministries together. And that would be a very important step. And now we heard the need to bring also other funds. We have already, as you probably know, the long-term vision, complementarity, synergies with the GCF, and bringing other funds into this mix would be also very important. So this is also part of a broader country engagement strategy that we should be developing for GEF 8. So there's a lot there to unpack, and hopefully a much more powerful vision for that will work out. We'll do also more comment by Germany in trying to disaggregate data as data is available. This is one of the problems we're trying to sort throughout, including gender disaggregated data on private sector engagement, particularly on MSMEs. So that's another important point. We also are developing a new strategy for the non-grant instruments window, which is important. And we see this, the increase in resources for this portfolio as a very important step for the GEF. We have been able to mobilize $17 for every dollar on average. And so an envelope of higher volume could potentially mobilize up to $4 billion in additional financing. if we improve also the strength and the selection of projects. So we also need to operate at a higher speed for private sector operations to work. This was highlighted in the IEO evaluation. That's private sector believes that we have cumbersome processes for private sector engagement, particularly on the NGI side of things. So we need to really be able to take some of these barriers out of the system. With this, I think I'm going to be turning it over back to you, Carlos Manuel. And if any written comments are available, we'd love to receive them because there's a lot of rich material that was contributed today. But I am conscious about the late hour. Thank you.
Thanks, Gustavo. Over to you, Francois.
Thank you very much, Chair. There was no direct question addressed to the points I introduced, but I note with thanks the statements of emphasis brought by council members on a number of very important points. Let me quote a few because they speak to other discussions we've had between yesterday and today. Germany bringing up the importance of timely submission of PIRs and MTRs, which is something we have addressed in the annual monitoring report. Full commitment to working with agencies towards full compliance and timeliness on this. From Denmark and China, the points were brought of looking into streamlining as a way of facilitating the work of all partnership members, and perhaps reflecting on transaction cost as well, downstream from that, as well as the issue of result reporting and the directions that we should take that might involve further capture of IP impact in particular. From Germany as well, the importance of gathering evidence of effectiveness on policy and safeguards, and we are very much working in that direction as highlighted in the management response in our regular reporting to Council with a view to improve over time, right? I also want to acknowledge again the importance of engagement and ownership and empowerment of OFPs that a number of you have highlighted, including the Caribbean representatives, Sweden, China, Thailand, and Mexico. And finally, the points made about the importance of the SGP program and the special role that it plays, which has been particularly discussed by Mexico, Thailand, and East Africa representatives. And the fact that in this respect, there are discussions, of course, that are still ongoing on the next SGP strategy, in which some of the points that you raised are under examination and discussion. We welcome any further detailed comments that you might have to inform this further. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Francois. Over to you, Mette.
Thank you very much, Carlos Manuel, and your team, and you have for the responses to all the council members' comments and questions regarding the OPS 7. I thank you very much for this discussion. And I will now invite the Council to adopt the draft decision included in document GEF/C .61/10. I see no request for the floor. I will just check here. I see no request for the floor, and the decision is adopted. I thank the Council very much for this decision, even the late hour. And now I will give the floor back to Carlos Manuel that will inform us of the way forward tomorrow.
Thanks, Mette. Thanks so much. So according to our agenda, we're supposed to address agenda item number 7, which is a work program for the GEF Trust Fund. We need at least 80 minutes to address this very important agenda item, and evidently we need to move it over to tomorrow. So this is my proposal for the agenda for tomorrow. We agree on begin the day with an executive session to finalize the businesses related to UNDP. So we will begin I will propose to begin tomorrow 1 hour earlier than what we normally have been doing it. This is 6 a.m. DC time instead of the regular normal 7 a.m. We began with an executive session. We will be providing all of you through email the proposed draft text that we'll be discussing there. So the objective of the executive sessions is to give more time for interactions, comments, and questions within the council members and the GEF Secretariat exclusively. We won't have any other people attending the meeting. We won't have UNDP staff or observers. It's just the GEF Sec and the council member. I felt that we needed some additional time for council to reflect, to interact. And then we need to take a decision on agenda item number 4. As soon as we finish the executive session, we'll begin a regular open session with staff presenting. And after that, we will bring today's agenda item, which is the work program for the GEF Trust Fund. And then we will go with the agenda, the other agenda items as the agenda states. It is very important to indicate that on the agenda item related to relations with the conventions, we had agreed on times with the intervention of the head of the different conventions. So I want to be flexible tomorrow in terms of managing the agenda so we cannot miss the agreed time with all of the heads of the different conventions who will be joining us tomorrow. So this is my proposal. I would like to see if you all agree with it. If you have any comments, please let us know in the chat box, or if you want to address the floor. This is the time for doing it. I see that France has an issue with beginning 1 hour earlier. So I would like to ask France if you can't be able to join us at 1 hour earlier, do you feel good if we can begin without France? Stephanie, were you able? Yes, please, Stephanie, you got the floor. Oh, online.
Hi, Carlos Manuel. No, I'm very sorry. We are quite busy tomorrow, and we are fully packed actually. So it's not possible for us to start earlier. It will be very unfortunate if you would start with the executive session without us, to be honest. So it would be very uncomfortable if you want to postpone that. So if you want to start with another item, maybe less sensitive, why not? But honestly, the work program is very sensitive as well, so I'm not sure it's possible to do that tomorrow, to start earlier. That's my feeling.
Okay, well, thank you. And we won't do the executive session without France, without any doubt, so we won't do it. We will have to deal with a logistic issue, which is going back and forth from an ordinary open session into the executive session. So probably we can begin 1 hour earlier with agenda items which are related to staff, to the coaching, co-chairing arrangement, with a note on the GEF 7th GEF Assembly, and after that we can have the executive session, and then go with the work program and relations with the convention. So let me just let me probably myself, the GEF Sec, and the co-chairs we normally have a debriefing meeting after we finish the ordinary meeting aligned. So let us think and work a little bit, and we will communicate and propose you all that through email if how we will propose to work tomorrow. So we will have the executive sessions with everybody included. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, just mentioned in the. I just mentioned in the chat. Actually, we are fine if you want to start a bit earlier with the topic related to staff and co-chairing, and then we can catch up and try to join you as soon as possible. But please don't start with like the most sensitive ones related to the executive session and the work program. This would be unfortunate.
We will do that. We will begin with staff, the co-chairing, and the GEF assembly. Then we do the executive session, and then we go to a regular normal session with the work program and the relations with the convention. I just need to go in detail with my staff so we can be able to comply with the agreed times that we already agreed with the head of the different conventions. Brenda, you're asking for the floor.
Yes, thank you, Carlos Manuel. For us, it's also very complicated to start an hour earlier because we have G20 tomorrow and the next day. So we are going to have these meetings at Indonesian time. So it will be a very, very long day. So we would kindly ask to start at 6 a.m. and if it's necessary to stay a little bit longer, we could do that tomorrow and the next day, or maybe going to Friday, but starting 1 hour earlier, it would not be possible for us.
So for information of everybody, 6 a.m. is the regular time for Mexico and Costa Rica where I am, and I'm proposing to begin 5 a.m. 6 a.m. Will be so Brenda, the issue with taking more time in our regular session means that those who are in the eastern part of the planet, it's very late, and we always have a policy to be very respectful on them. And today is a good example of how much time are we taking. Brenda, is there a possibility for an alternate to participate on behalf of your constituency so we can keep the possibility to begin 1 hour before?
Okay, we will touch base with them and we'll let you know a little bit later.
Okay, thank you for your flexibility and your support on this, Brenda. It is very helpful. Do I have any other comments from any council member? Okay, so we will proceed as I indicated. We'll be having a debriefing meeting, and we will be communicating you the proposed agenda for tomorrow. We all agreed to begin 1 hour before normal regular time. With this, I would like to close today's council meeting. I would like to thank everybody for their participation, your flexibility, and your will to do an extra effort so we can be on track with everything that we have in the agenda. So thank you so much. Have a good day.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye. Muchas gracias.
Bye.
Goodbye.
Thank you. Gracias.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, guys. See you tomorrow.
Ciao.